All right, welcome everyone. This is Mayor Harmon, and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the City Council to order and state that all council members are present via teleconferencing, and ask Council Member Pease to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to ask City Manager Johnson to please present the City Manager report. You're muted, Derek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief report tonight. I'll just primarily focus on the bulk of staff's activity in the last few weeks. Most of it has been on the anticipation and the preparation for going to red tier. And as you heard today, the county announced that the state had authorized us to move into red tier. And as I mentioned at one of the disaster council meetings, it is a big milestone for all of us. We have been closely monitoring the IHME forecast, and the IHME forecasts are showing at this time that there will be a continued trend downwards in terms of infections. And that's not to say that we don't need to continue to be vigilant. It still needs to be the case. Hygiene, masks, and social distancing are still the order of the day, and we'll be continuing to push that out. The other activities that have been focus of staff's time is all of the work that began following council's workshop on February 6th with the culmination of the 4 major city goals. And so staff has been feverishly working on our work programs and our budgets, and those were submitted last week. They have been packaged together, and we have an internal process over the next few days to evaluate the budgetary requests. The initial assessment is that the base budgets are coming in on target, meaning that they're matching the fiscal forecast that we provided to the council in February. And the challenge for us is going to be to balance out all of the needs and all of the budget requests for the major city goals. If you recall, to the council, I shared that at the time the forecast was showing that we had about $500,000 available for general fund for additional allocation in the forecast, and roughly about $1.4 million available in Measure G funding. The good news is that those numbers are holding well. We had a discussion with the Revenue Enhancement Oversight Committee, and they understand where the city is at this time and the need for us to potentially look at augmenting funding as we come out of this pandemic, which has also been a recession and a financial impact. And so, as I've shared with the council in the past, we have been targeting an 85-15% split on Measure G 20, meaning 85% of the dollars might be allocated to capital and 15% allocated to new programs. We heard from the REOC that there would be some flexibility going into the budget preparation, understanding that some of the major city goals and work programs and efforts that we have, particularly around economic recovery and resiliency, might require a greater shot of funding than otherwise would be provided as we get into the outer years. All this work is being accompanied by some intense fiscal analysis that's being led by our finance department to look at our capital program. As you know, and you'll see in the annual report that'll be coming to the council in April, that's the general plan annual report, we are seeing record amounts of housing production. And that means that we need to be very, very closely watching our capital investments and making sure our capital investments, and particularly our transportation and multimodal improvements, keep pace with our housing. So all of this work is being done. I can say with certainty that, as always, the need outstrips the resources, and so we're going to be making some tough choices and recommendations leading up to the strategic budget direction, which the council will hear on April 20th. So that has been the bulk of staff's time, and now I'm just going to switch into a disaster council report. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. There we go. And so the recommendation tonight is to receive the update from the Emergency Services Director. The trends are heading in the right direction. San Luis Obispo cases are about 19,700. Just to give you perspective, that's about 7% of the county population has contracted COVID-19. In California, a little over 3 million, close to 3.5 million. So about roughly a little higher than our county rate. In the United States, 28 million, worldwide cases, 115 million. Today's cases, these are lower numbers than we've seen. 28, that active case number, 489. That's the number we continue to watch. Most of the cases have recovered, but we unfortunately are over 235 deaths. ICU availability, that number is looking strong, 76% out of the total of 38 ICU beds. The total occupied beds is 9, 4 are COVID. The residents with COVID-19 in the hospital, 19 and 5 in the ICU. So the good news today on the state's reopening criteria, effective tomorrow, SLO County will be in the red tier. We have an adjusted rate at 6.8, which puts us in the tier 2 substantial. Our unadjusted is 12.6, and we have that, and that's the number without the testing. Our positivity rate is at 2.7%, so that is looking really good. And our healthy places index, or health equity index, is at 3.4. And we still are seeing testing. It's dropped off by a few hundred testing spots over the last few weeks, but we're still double the median in the state of California. So what does that mean in terms of the state of California red tiers? And so I want to provide some details to the council, because this sometimes becomes very, very confusing. Gyms are open indoors at 10% capacity. Restaurants will be able to open at 25% capacity, or 100 people, whichever is fewer, wineries outdoor only, which is great for a big part of our economy. Bars and breweries not serving food, they must remain closed. And this is an area where certainly there's some confusion from time to time, and where we spend a lot of time reaching out to some of our operators to make sure that they do have real food service in place. Retail, 50% capacity. I won't go through all of these. Some of these, I'll just hit some of the highlights. Movie theaters at 25% capacity, or 100 people. Thus far, at least last time, this was not an incentive enough for movie theaters to begin to reopen. Hotels with some modifications, plus fitness centers, can be open at 10%. Places of worship at 25%. And then non-essential offices, those continue to be remote work only. Family entertainment centers, outdoor only. And then you can see museums, zoos, and aquariums open indoors at 25%. And certainly that is something that I think a lot of our nonprofit sector are very eager and interested in opening up. So where are we on the vaccine dashboard? Nearly 10 million vaccinations administered in the state of California, 12 million delivered, 12,300,000 roughly have been shipped. The partnership with CDC, the pharmacy partnership, about over close to 1.5 million delivered, and 1.469 have been shipped. The total doses in our county are at close to 70,000, which is a fantastic number and was lauded today by the governor. So where are we in terms of the vaccine distribution? Those in phase 1A are still eligible. Those are the healthcare and community healthcare workers and long-term care residents and staff. Vaccinating now is adults 65 plus, Next up are some frontline critical infrastructure workers, and then you can see the later phases. The vaccines that have been sent to SLO County, total of over 50,000 vaccines shipped and over 45,000 total doses administered. If you're looking for details, because as we think about the next phase, is perhaps we go into the phase 1B and some frontline critical infrastructure workers. If you go to recovery.slo, there's information about the specific types of workers that would be eligible for vaccination in that next phase. So more information about vaccination, because that is really our pathway to get out of this pandemic. The total of vaccinations of the first dose, over 30,000. The second dose is approaching 15,000. I won't go through all the details of the vaccinations this week. I'll just really point out this number of 10,944, which is the number that we should be really proud of. Almost 11,000 vaccinations in our county. If you recall, the whole system was designed to be for throughput of 15,000 vaccinations. And in terms of additional distribution information, vaccine appointments are now open to 65 plus appointments at Thursday at 9 a.m. And they are planning for 12,000 vaccinations next week. So we're starting to see that supply chain open up. There were some encouraging announcements yesterday with Johnson & Johnson forming partnerships with other manufacturers to push out the newly approved vaccination from the FDA. I thought I'd share some information about SLO City employees. We have had, and this has required a tremendous amount of time. This is a lot of the work going on in the background. We've had to investigate 1,246 potential exposures to our city employees. Fortunately, that's only resulted in 25 confirmed cases. 6 of the 25 were work-related, and 4% of our employees have been infected, which is about half the per capita rate in the city of San Luis Obispo. And so city of San Luis is about 8% of our community has been infected with COVID-19. Countywide, about 7%. That compares the city of Paso Robles, which is hovering just above 12%. And I attribute this to the tremendous amount of work that's been led by our HR and our safety teams focusing on safe practices, physical distancing, the tremendous work from IT on remote work, the careful follow-up on reporting, our quick response and action to isolate and send people home, and the generous employment policies that we've moved forward to provide employees COVID leave, and then the continued consistent and clear communication going out to our employees about what measures they need to take to prevent the spread. And with that, Madam Mayor, that concludes my presentation for this evening, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Derek. And I just had the opportunity to meet with the governor and several other local electeds and folks out at the Cuesta site today. And it was really great to get a tour of that and see that firsthand. And what a sweet and kind of fun, if that's the right word, place to be, where people are so happy to be getting the vaccines. And it was great to see the governor there and learn more about the efforts in terms of getting more vaccinations everywhere, of course, but here on the Central Coast as well, especially. So yeah, that was exciting. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for the city manager? I'm not seeing any.
Sorry, I do, Madam Mayor. I did the hand icon, but I know
that's
okay. I know there's a lot to keep track of at once. Thank you, City Manager Johnson. The one we've talked about providing a general update about homelessness and the tents in the park and some of that education and enforcement. Were you available to do that kind of update today, or is that set for another meeting in a larger context?
I'm happy to provide some of that update today.
Yeah, that'd be great.
As the council knows, one of our major city goals is working on both housing and homelessness. I should start off to say that the council did allocate, the first time in the history of the city of San Luis Obispo back in December, some funding for our homeless response manager to coordinate and help connect people to services. We are fortunate, and I'm proud that we've got some really great applicants who put their names into the pool. I'm pretty excited that we'll be able to bring some individuals forward. We're also concurrently working on restoring the safe parking or parking program, an additional site over at the railroad station. If council may recall that during the height of the pandemic, the county of San Luis Obispo stood up a temporary place for parking RVs for those that were living out of their vehicles. That program was ended by the county in June. And so there was a big gap, and we started to see concerns in some of our neighborhoods. And so we've partnered with Capslo, and we'll be moving forward with a program in the next couple of weeks over at the railroad parking lot next to the museum. We're also under discussions with our partners at 40 Prado with the potential to expand the number of beds at 40 Prado by 25%. And that's something that will come to the council, or I may take that action earlier as part of the COVID dollars, but it's certainly going to be something that the council should anticipate seeing during the budget cycle. And then most recently, and I think there's been a lot of focus lately is on some of the tents and some of the camping in Mitchell Park. I'll just remind the council that we are constantly working with the county of San Luis Obispo and the other 6 cities on a comprehensive approach. And as the council knows, the state of California has funneled nearly about $11 million to the county of San Luis Obispo. And the county of San Luis Obispo has pushed those dollars out throughout the county. In some instances, it's been provided to some of our local partners. There's been some exciting developments, for example, in that arena with funding being provided up in the city of Paso Robles to convert a hotel for housing. And there's other efforts underway that will impact our region. And right now we're currently working, for example, with the county on securing the remaining funding for a detox facility next to 40 Prado. More immediately, and I paint that picture because the strategy has been throughout our county, which I think is considered a best practice, is to try to encourage and try to push individuals to go to the Homeless Services Center or 40 Prado. That was a culmination of years and years and years of effort to be able to consolidate both medical care, mental health care, food, job training, shelter, tutoring for kids, et cetera. It was a facility that was needed to really consolidate a lot of the basic services and then connect individuals to other services such as permanent housing. And so that being said, when we encounter individuals who are camping in the community during regular times, not necessarily COVID times, it has been our practice to encourage them and to have them go to 40 Prado. Certainly the pandemic complicated that. And as we are now coming out of the pandemic and things are seen and the pandemic is much under control, we're not seeing infections in the congregate living settings, we are continuing to do that, and we're doing that more. So about a week ago, the Public Works Director and our Parks Director issued an administrative interpretive guidelines indicating that tents were not allowed at any time in the parks. Camping or sleeping in the parks is not allowed at any time. And so we are slowly working with our CAT team and our social workers to encourage individuals to transition over to 40 Prado. That will continue to be our strategy to try to have individuals find a permanent shelter, find ways for reliable support services, and that will be our approach for the immediate future. I will say that that's not to say that the need or that 40 Prado can accommodate everyone in our community. There is clearly the case where long-term the amount of need outstrips the ability for 40 Prado to provide services. And I think that's part of what we're going to address as part of the major city goal.
And Madam Mayor, City Manager, if I can just provide a little bit of clarification, because I think there has been some misunderstanding in the community around the action taken by the Parks and Rec Director and Public Works Director. There was no new ordinance. The council was not asked to pass any new laws. These are provisions that have been part of city code for many, many years. There are encroachment provisions which prohibit setting up of structures in our parks or in any public space for that matter. But in particular, the tents have become an issue in the parks because of illegal activities that have been conducted, obscured from public view and from enforcement in the parks. There was also some information circulated suggesting that people were arrested for having tents in parks, and I want to make clear for everyone who's listening that that is inaccurate information. There were no arrests made related to tents. There were arrests made in one of our parks about a week ago, and that was related to active hard drug use in our parks and potentially some additional warrants associated with the folks that were engaging in that conduct. So there may have been tents present, but there was no enforcement action related to the tents at that time. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone had that information available to them as well.
Thank you so much, City Attorney.
Thank you, City Manager, for that update. And then just to be clear that there have been, although we couldn't accommodate everybody if everybody came at the same time to 40 Prado, at this time they are averaging 15 to 20 available spots a night that folks who could
I believe over the last couple of months, it's been anywhere between 6 and 20 beds available.
Great, thank you.
On Sunday was 14.
Thank you. And so for folks that didn't totally understand that last exchange, that is about the shelter being underutilized on a regular basis. And so we do continue to have open spaces at the shelter on a regular basis that are going underutilized. All right. Then with that, we will move on to our proclamation. And I'd like to present a proclamation declaring the month of March as Women's History Month. And I'd like to present it to the League of Women Voters in general, but also Sydney Marie Apsey, who will be receiving this proclamation representing the League of Women Voters, an organization that I am quite fond of and very much appreciate. So thank you for being here tonight. And also maybe would just like to thank the League of Women Voters before we get into this proclamation for being our Democracy Concierge team, which under COVID has unfortunately not been able to meet. But thank you so much for creating a good entry point for people coming to a city council meeting and helping them understand how they work and understand what's helpful and the way we show up at city council meetings. That was really useful. So maybe we can figure out a way to do that over Zoom if we're not going to come back in real life anytime soon. All right, Women's History Month. Whereas San Luis Obispo women have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation, our state, and the city of San Luis Obispo in countless ways, recorded and unrecorded. And whereas local women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of life in our community by comprising a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. And whereas local women have played a unique role throughout our history by providing the majority of the volunteer labor force in our community and have been essential to the establishment of charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our community, including the League of Women Voters, the Monday Club, the Latino Outreach Council, among many others. And whereas local women have played and continue to play a major role as frontline workers confronting the COVID-19 pandemic and providing essential services, and whereas local women have served our county courageously and our country in the military, law enforcement have made contributions to American history, teaching, and literature. And whereas women have been leaders in positions of government and business, and in increasing numbers are rising to prominent positions. And whereas local women have been leaders in progressive social change, in securing the rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, and in civil rights and social justice movements that help create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas this year's national theme for Women's History Month is Valiant Women of the Vote, refusing to be silenced. And whereas this year, 2021, marks the 101st anniversary of the 19th Amendment and women's suffrage and the League's dedication to fair and safe elections. Now, therefore, let it be resolved at the City Council of the City of San Luis Obispo, here assembled in collaboration with the League of Women Voters of San Luis Obispo County, that March is designated as Women's History Month in the City of San Luis Obispo. So, Cindy Marie. You're muted.
How's that? Is that better?
There we go. That's
Okay.
huge improvement.
Okay. Cindy Marie Absey, co-president of the League of Women Voters, and I believe here tonight is also Ann Havlick, who shares the president position with me for the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Mayor Harmon and San Luis Obispo City Council members for this proclamation recognizing Women's History Month and the role of the League and community allies in promoting the status of women in local government, businesses, and community organizations. We would be remiss if we did not note that your city council and mayoral positions are all held by women. And that's a testament to you and all the women and men who laid the groundwork for your leadership here tonight. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to voting rights and working to encourage the public's active participation in government and public policies through education and advocacy. As we commemorate Women's History Month, we mark our decades-long struggle to pass the ERA to the US Constitution, and we hope that 2021 is the year that that happens. Now, since last fall, we have sponsored and launched a number of exciting projects I'm just going to quickly mention. Related to the general election of 2020, we hosted weekly Lunch with the League webinars on voting information and rights, and we featured former County Clerk Recorder Julie Rodwald, and she is currently chairing our Voter Services Committee. Then in early November, we launched a series of educational webinars on homelessness in San Luis Obispo County, and we have featured panels of local experts. And later this month, we will be hosting our third webinar on persons who are unsheltered and the challenges that that entails. So I was really interested to hear the city manager's discussion about the city's activities around homelessness and working on that very important issue in our community. And recently, we hosted a pro and con webinar on the state parks plan to develop Oso Flaco Lake. And just last week, we issued a call to action to our members and allied organizations to oppose the state's plan that fails to protect the environmentally sensitive area and habitat of Oso Flaco. In celebration of Women's History Month on March 20th at 3 p.m., we hope that you will all join us for a special viewing of an off-Broadway one-woman play called Tea for Three. The three are Lady Bird Johnson, Pat Nixon, and Betty Ford, all former First Ladies, and all played by award-winning playwright, Elaine Bromka. Please join us for that event. We'll be doing it via Zoom. You don't have to be a member. Just check the League's website and we'll get you connected. Finally, thank you, Mayor Harmon, for mentioning our Democracy Concierge Service. We miss it too, and we're eager to come back and help you out with that and help guide our citizens in participating in government using civility and respect. And we look forward to that. And maybe we can talk some more about how to get that done via Zoom. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the League. And just also want to circle back to the proclamation and name that it does name that it's the 101st anniversary of the women's right to vote, that didn't originally include all women. And so we recognize that. And that's a big part of the work that we are continuing to do here in the city to the best of our ability. So thank you so much to the League for all of your work. You're right. It's quite possible, if not certain, that we wouldn't be here, this full female city council, if were it not for the League of Women Voters. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, certainly in my case, as I was on the board of the League of Women Voters when I first decided to run for office. So that's definitely true for me. So thank you so much. All right, so now we're going to move on to public comment. And so before we get started, I just want to ground us in our expectations about public comment, and that we've always had since I've been mayor anyway. And so I just want to read a little bit and ground us in that. And so I just want to call for public comment, and this is for items that are not on the agenda. And so just to be clear, if you are here to speak tonight on public comment, please raise your virtual hand, and the city clerk is going to take your name, and then we're going to close public comment after we get your names initially here. So I just want to remind the public of our sort of public discourse guidelines that we try and uphold here at the council. So listen first, right? So we try and make an honest effort to understand the views and the reasoning of others by listening to understand, not necessarily listening to find fault, right? But allowing thoughtful discussion to lead the best possible outcomes. Respect different opinions. So we will try and invite and consider all kinds of different perspectives and opinions, and allowing space for ideas to be expressed and opposed and clarified in a constructive, solution-oriented manner. Show courtesy. So we will treat all colleagues and staff and members of the public in a professional and courteous manner, whether it's in person or online or in written communication. And this is especially true and important to remember when we do disagree, that we can disagree without being disagreeable, right? And to criticize constructively. So no doubt, I mean, I receive a ton of criticism, but I can tell you from personal experience, like when that criticism comes in a constructive, solution-oriented way, I feel like I can hear it and we can get a better outcome, right? So we strive to advance the solutions to community issues when faced with disagreement. We do more than just simply share our concerns with differing opinions, but we work to propose a course of action of mutual benefit, right? We're all here to make San Luis Obispo, and by extension, the world, a better place. And I think last, but certainly not least, debate the policies and not the person. So we focus on the issues and not personalize debate or use other tactics that trust me, like divert attention from the core issues. And so speakers need to direct comments towards the council and not the audience or the staff, and should avoid personal attacks or abusive language or any other type of disruptive behavior that really gets us off track from the goals that I think we all share, or at least the goal of being able to engage in constructive dialogue to make this a better community. My goal here in these meetings is to make progress and find solutions to move our community forward. And I hope that you will join me tonight in that goal, because we do have a large agenda in front of us tonight. And so I want us all to consider how we can effectively hear public comment for items not on the agenda, while also being sure that we get to the business that we're tasked with tonight. And also, let me just be clear about the specificity of this issue and the tenderness, right? The sensitivity. I get it. Like, I get it that civility will not solve racism or any other issue that we face. And I'm equally certain that when we engage in destructive attacks against each other, we will likewise not get to where we want to go. And so, just to be clear, if there are personal attacks, that we will have to take a pause, just like we would in a regular city council meeting, regardless of the topic or the context. So please share your truth in a way that we can hear it, the way that we can actually get constructive change and really do something about it. And so please, again, as I said at the top of my comments here, raise your hand now, and then we are going to count the commenters so that we can do it in a timely fashion, and then we will be closing public comment. So City Clerk, do you have a count of how many speakers we have?
Madam Mayor, we have 25, 26. Now it's climbing. 28, 29,
Okay, let's stop it there, and then we will do 1 minute each per speaker. As you'll note on our agenda, we try and designate 15 minutes for public comment. It often goes beyond that, and so tonight it will also go beyond that. But in order to really create a container really for real like freedom of speech around all of the items on our agenda, there does need to be a conciseness and a way of conducting these meetings that really gets us to the outcome that we want. And also, just to be clear, like if you have more to say and you don't get a chance to say it tonight, there are other ways to share that. So you are, of course, as most of you probably know, welcome and open and encouraged to send emails to the email council@slowcity.org email that we all get it as council members, staff sees that, the public has access to that. And so there are so many ways to get your point across, including asking us for meetings. You know, I know that I have a lot of meetings, I think, with probably some of you on the call tonight coming up, and I'm looking forward to that space where we can have more of that kind of dialogue that I think a lot of us are actually hungry for, but is no doubt difficult in the space of a governmental public meeting. And so with that in mind, we'll be closing public comment, and each public speaker will be getting 1 minute here for public comment. So thank you, Teresa.
Just 1 minute. I need to adjust my timer. Okay. Our first speaker is Michelle M.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Councilmember Stewart for reaching out to me and answering my questions and clarifying how the municipal code 12.04.020 applies to tents. I really appreciated that. I also wanted to update the number. There was originally 12 unhoused folks that we knew their names about, and that number's gone up to 15. So I wanted to read out each of their names really fast. Carlina, Mississippi, Joe, Christine, Jessica, Lance, Marty, Bongo Ray, John, Alicia, James, Max, Scotland, Ash, and Kevin. I also wanted to thank Councilmember Peace for coming out to the vigil and speaking to me. I really appreciated that. With the deaths, at least one of these individuals died of COVID. So I would like to know what the city is planning on doing as far as outreach. How are they planning on reaching out to the unhoused individuals to get vaccine out to them and also access, because many of them don't have access to the internet. They don't have cars. They can't make it out to Cuesta. So I'm interested in knowing that. And then the last thing that I wanted to address is, never mind, I don't have time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next person name is Brandon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, I had more that I wanted to say, so I guess I'll make it quick. Thinking about some of our comments that I heard from some council members on the 23rd, they spoke about us being delusional, but if we look at slow PD clearance rates, which are public through the California Department for Justice, in 2019, they were 16% for rape, 29% for robbery, 13% for property crime, 7% for burglary. For pretty much every crime that Carlin Christensen used to justify not defunding, you are more likely to get away with it than to be arrested, charged, and convicted by the slow PD. So while you are laughing at the ideological delusions of those to dare to question why we spend so much on the department seemingly failing at their main job, I would be curious as to how it is not an ideological delusion not to consider the possibility that we may need to reconsider how our city prioritizes its money and services it provides. Because the fact is, we know what causes crime. It's poverty, it's housing insecurity, it's food insecurity, and it's lack of healthcare. And if your concern is really public safety, then I would ask that you spend less time talking down to your constituents and more time meeting those basic needs.
Thank you so much.
Okay, our next speaker is Kevin Foote.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Hi, I just wanted to thank Councilmember Andy Pease as well as Vice Mayor Erica Stewart for going above and beyond the meetings that we tune into. Andy, I want to thank you for bearing witness to the community reaching out to our most vulnerable populations and being there for the vigil for Kevin and those alongside him who should be here and be in part of what Ms. Marks said before, this beloved community that clearly is not sharing the same amount of love with them. Erica, I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me as well as one of my colleagues. And even though I didn't see eye to eye with you on so many things, I learned, I was able to listen. And that's what local government should be about, to listen to constituents, to help them grow, and to listen to us when actions aren't on your side of that screen. So I want to thank you too for stepping up. I appreciate it.
Okay, our next speaker is John Ashbaugh.
John, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. You might be muted.
Yep.
There we go.
I am indeed. Okay. Thank you all for your support of the History Center at San Luis Obispo. And I wanted to specifically thank you for the PCC grant that enables us to promote the Carnegie Lecture this Friday evening. You're all going to be invited to that. You are right now. I can tell you, just go on the History Center website, register. You'll get the Zoom link for that meeting. Pete Kelly, a former board member, former restaurant owner, historian, has just published a book called The Quick and the Dead. He's going to be talking about that subject. It's a painful subject. The 1858 hanging of 7 people of color, Californios, in Mission Plaza, in and around the Mission, and the events that led up to that, and why Pete has a totally different take on that issue. With your support and the support of your staff, particularly Parks and Rec staff, Greg Avakian, people in Public Works, we're going to be not only talking about this event on Friday, but also posting signs in Mission Plaza for you to follow a self-guided walking tour of that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ashbaugh. Can you send us a link or some information to our city email? Great. I'm going to assume that was a yes, but you probably got cut off. Next speaker, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, I just want to clear up some things that were said last meeting about defunding the police. I just want to clarify that defunding the police means investing in communities. It really means addressing problems at the root of them. It means investing in care, not cops, and allocating money from service that's not serving the community. It means vision plans like the Green New Deal for our community that invest in housing, healthcare, transportation, mental health, art, food chains, and culture. We want to retrofit new hotels. We want the FEMA reimbursements. The new housing, affordable housing, is such a helpful addition, but also it's not enough. We have almost 15.5% of the homes for sale are not affordable, and that's a really bad. I also just want to humanize houselessness in our community because I don't think a lot of people do. My sister was houseless over this summer, and she was not able to get into 3040 Prado because she was not sober. And so looking at the services that we are provided, they're not serving our community, and I want to invest in sober care as well, and not just policing. So thank you.
Yes.
Our next speaker is Marshall James.
Go ahead, Marshall.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, okay, so I'll speak fast. Last week, City Manager Johnson quoted the civility policy that included, quote, to avoid rhetoric intended to humiliate, malign, or question the motivation of those whose opinions are different from ours, to strive to understand different perspectives and to choose our words carefully, to speak truthfully without accusation and to avoid distortion. However, I feel that some members of council were quick to discard much of this pledge when it came their time to discuss the public comments from the AAR. I will avoid rhetoric here and instead speak truthfully to facts. February 16th saw 33 public comments, 1 speaking in favor of the report and 32 echoing the sentiments of civilians interviewed by Carrie Manziger for the report, opposing the police characterization of the events. Of those 33 comments, only 4 gave insult or used curse words. Councillor Marks then objected to the overwhelming calls from civil public commenters to reduce police budgets and reallocate those funds into humane programs. Well, I'll stop there.
Our next speaker is Colin Mcclinchy. I'm sorry, I'm sure I mispronounced that.
No worries. Councilmember Christensen, regarding what you said in the meeting on February 23rd about the difference between the quote unquote difference between defunding the police and getting quote our police to do the policing and getting the county and others to do the social services, end quote, regarding that, there is no difference, as Carmen said. When the police are trusted to do anything other than responding to violent and dangerous situations, they turn them into violent and dangerous situations. As someone who is there at the protest on June 1st, I can say that the protesters pose no threat to the community or the army of militarized police. Instead, the police marching on the protesters and bashing them with the riot shields are the ones who escalated the situation. What this county needs to do right now is to ensure that police are doing the policing, not responding to domestic disputes and mental health episodes, which would be better suited for social services, not harassing houseless members of our community, and certainly not attacking peaceful protesters or unjustly arresting their leaders on bogus claims. We need to invest in social services that are better suited to serving our communities. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mitchell Wexler.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to make this brief. I am a student. I am speaking as a student who represents students at Cal Poly, and here are some statistics about us. 19% of all college students, according to NCES, actually have disabilities, meaning that they are non-neurotypicalities. I'm speaking mental disabilities, of course. However, in terms of police brutality, I would like to address that the amount of people who are killed are 50% that are disabled, meaning half essentially of everybody killed are disabled. So I would just like to clarify the idea of defunding the police. It isn't about making communities less safe. It's about allowing for communities to respond to certain situations with the appropriate resources. One example I'd like to give would be the city of Denver, Colorado, which has had excellent success with its STAR program and being able to have doctors on call respond to mental health situations instead of police, which actually led to less arrests and saved many lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lipa Radic.
Lipa, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. So you might want to unmute. City Clerk, is there anything we can do here, or?
It seems like she's dropped off
Okay.
the call. Okay.
If she pops up again, we'll track that.
Okay, our next speaker is Manuel Signs. And it looks like he has dropped off also, sorry. Melissa, oh my, Meyer. Just 1 second.
And just by way of reminder, Teresa, you have all the names that were hands up before we close public comment. Just want to remind people that we're not taking new hands.
That's correct. And I have a screenshot of the names as they were when you stopped it.
And also remind people that there's other ways of communicating to the council as well. If you didn't get a chance to get in this public comment line, you can email us at the city as well. Next speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. And just wanted to really address the sweeps that were discussed earlier in this meeting that Councilman Johnson mentioned that when his officers go out, they really, quote, encourage these the houseless or unhoused neighbors to seek out services. We really need these sweeps to stop as they're immoral. And once these sweeps happen, the unhoused neighbors really don't have anywhere else to go. The temporary homes that they had earlier are no longer available to them. And because of lack of transportation, cars, accessibility, how are our unhoused neighbors even supposed to get to these services? And we really need to expand our utility need for rent, mortgage. The funds through the SB 91 are not enough because landlords can opt out of it. There are numerous other shortcomings. And so really to address our unhoused neighbors and to humanize them, as Carmen mentioned, we need to stop sweeps and offer more accessible services.
Thank you.
Okay, Lipa, I think.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry about that. So not great at technology. Anyway, the police budget and officer headcount should be at least reduced by 33%. Shame on all council members who support and encourage police brutality in any form, but especially those who agree that a half-empty water bottle and invisible rocks justify the use of tear gas. Invest in peacekeeping, conflict resolution, divest from unnecessary new police stations that are currently over $50 million in estimation, divest from inhumane houseless sweeps, and invest in community outreach and rehabilitation. Councilmember Marks, I wonder how you justify hearing our cries, as you put it, over and over again and in the same words, and yet still you sit on your hands. City Council, you do not listen. You do not listen to us here. You do not listen to us there. You do not listen to us on repeat. You do not listen to us in the street. I wonder why you even hold this seat. Thank you so much for signing up for a job where you listen to and act on behalf of the people in this community, regardless of who they are or how they speak. If you don't like the sound of the people, maybe you should do better.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Manuel Sines.
Hello, City Council of San Luis Obispo. My name is Manuel. As a resident of San Luis Obispo County, I would like to see the area move forward with sustainable practices that mitigate the effects of climate change. As we reach a carbon level of 1.5 degrees Celsius, we should be doing our part as a community to meet a goal of 2 degrees Celsius that has been suggested by scientists. My hope is that we can begin transforming our electrical system, converting to 100% electrical energy while making use of renewable technology to extract energy like solar panels, wind farms, and geothermal energy plants. If anything has shown us in the past few weeks in Texas is that climate change can affect us in unexpected moments, and we must be ready to navigate while the world focuses on reducing carbon emissions. This is especially important for communities of color and low income, as the effects of climate change disproportionately affect these groups on top of already facing social forms of discrimination. Our responsibility as humans is to give equal opportunity to live a meaningful life. Please consider moving forward for better environmental practices. Thank you.
Manuel, I'm just going to pop in here super quick before we get to the next speaker. We do a lot action on climate change. I would go to our website and just do a little digging, and you can find a lot of information. I think you'll be quite heartened to see how much we're doing on climate change. Next speaker, please.
Kalia Conrad.
Hi, City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I first would like to thank you for mentioning that it is Women's History Month, but I'd like to reiterate the importance of centering Black, Indigenous, and women of color this Women's History Month. Above all else, we need to make sure that their needs are being met. I also want to say that the county was allocated a California Community Solutions grant of $5 million that would be put towards 5 cities in their Houseless Coalition, Caps Low, and El Camino Homeless Organization for rent relief. I've inquired to multiple of these organizations on how we can access this money and this funding, and they keep saying it's on hold. So I'm wondering how and when the community can access this money. I also want to say that the affordable housing project being considered tonight is only a start. We need to do far more for low income housing as part of the city's DEI strategic plan mentioned in the report on the DEI committee. If we really want SLO to be diverse, it means making sure that we don't only have private. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, and just want to make sure you know that your questions about county funding need to go to the county. And they will be able to give you the best answer on what they're doing with that funding, because we don't hold that money or that information. Next speaker, please.
Ethan Weiss.
Ethan, if you're speaking, just so you know, we can't hear you. You might want to unmute. There we go.
I'm Ethan Weiss. I'm a community member of San Luis Obispo. I'm a student at Cal Poly, and I'm part of Abolitionist Action Central Coast SLO. We will continue to repeat ourselves until the people are heard, because you're not hearing us. What you on the city council and your constituents need is not to make any expansions but to the police, but rather to defund the SLO Police Department by 33% and to provide rent, mortgage, and utility relief for all. It really seems that the city council is misunderstanding our message of defunding the police, going so far as to call the message ideological delusions and emotions. The city council is meant to serve the people, and defunding the police is what we, the people, are calling for. Police do not keep us safe, and they never have, because they were never meant to. The purpose of the police is to control us and to protect property over the lives of the people, which is especially true for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people who suffer disproportionately at the hands of the police. They also abuse our houseless population and SLO regularly, people who are just trying to survive in the midst of this pandemic that threatens us all, which puts the houseless at risk even more so. Putting money into the police won't help us.
I don't know if it's me, but you just got cut off, as if maybe your Wi-Fi went out. Erica, I see you blinking. Can you hear me? Am I here? Okay. I thought I was. Okay. I'm sorry. Maybe that. I don't know what happened there. City Clerk.
Our next speaker is Michelle Ragosa.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Time and time again, this council repeats that you're focused on the community. If you were really focused on the community, you would reduce the resources for the police department that do not keep us safe nor serve the people of this community properly, and replace them with something better, particularly rent, mortgage, and utility relief for community members suffering during this pandemic. So many people are out of work in what was already one of the most expensive places to live in the state. The city of SLO needs its own rent relief program. The community will not be satisfied until we see our community transform for the better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alejandro.
Yes, hello. My name is Alejandro. I've lived in SLO for a couple of years now, and I'm speaking as a community member and as a part of Abolitionist Action Central Coast SLO. And I want to reiterate the need for no expansions to policing, defunding SLO PD by 33%, and rent, mortgage, and utility relief for all. Councilmember Marks has commented on people repeating ourselves, but I wanted to reiterate that the only reason we're having to repeat ourselves is because we are not being listened to. Council members Christensen and Marks both said flat out, we will not defund. And as several people have brought up, Councilmember Christensen even called it ideological delusions and emotions. But I wanted to reiterate to everybody listening, the only flawed ideology in this conversation is the ideology that police keep us safe. As several people have brought up in this conversation tonight, police don't keep us safe. They were never meant to. And I wanted to clarify something about the sweeps as well, and what the city attorney was saying. There's complete discretion on what to enforce. We don't have to keep sweeping people out of the park, and arresting people for drugs doesn't serve anybody, doesn't serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Declan Gali.
Hello, my name's Declan Galley, and I'm a member of the SLO community and Abolitionist Actions on the Central Coast and SLO. So tonight we heard some talk about 40 Prado, which has not been proven and shown to be an effective solution for everyone. A one-size-fits-all model doesn't work, especially when you have to be sober in order to enter the 40 Prado area. We also need better long-term housing, which means more low-income and no-income housing. Tonight's project is a start, but Table 2A, specifically in the SLO zoning code, is a barrier to increasing the affordable housing available in the city of SLO. Table 2A, as almost rendered the slow inclusionary zoning code useless, requiring 1 to 2 affordable housing units on very large projects. We also need a 33% defunding of the SLO Police Department. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kyle Meter.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm going to talk on the police budget that you guys are trying to expand and not defunding. The fact is we need to invest in our community first, and we need to invest in better housing, more affordable housing, and mental health. And I can go on. And you guys are sitting here not listening to anyone. That is a fact. The fact is we are here repeating ourselves because no one is listening. And that's what freedom of speech is. We're going to keep talking. We're going to keep saying what we need to say until people actually listen. And the matter is, if you can actually fix the community, then maybe we wouldn't be here. Then the police are not going to solve this issue. Another police station is not going to fix anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Kat Schroeder-Mora.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, my name's Kat, and I'm speaking as part of Abolitionist Action Central Coast SLO. And as others have been saying, we are going to continue to repeat ourselves until the people are heard. What your constituents need is no expansions to policing, SLO PD defunded by 33%, and rent mortgage utility relief for all. Councilmember Christensen, you recently said we will not defund based on ideological delusions and emotions, as others have been talking about. And this sentiment has been shared by others on the council. When I heard you respond that way, I didn't even know what to say. The statement is willfully ignorant, and it's completely invalidating to the lived experience of so many of your constituents. We've lived through an entire summer of national protests that has made it abundantly clear for you that police do not keep us safe and they cannot be reformed. Countless organizations across the nation have provided you with research, with evidence. They've spelled out the history for you. They've laid their trauma bare for you. They've literally written policy. How can you possibly call this ideological delusions? And people are literally dying. How can you dismiss us for being... You also told us to listen first before this, and I suggest you do that for us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Riley Delk.
Hi, I'm Raleigh. I'm speaking as a community member who's lived here my whole life and a part of Abolitionist Action, Central Coast SLO. We will continue to repeat ourselves, and your constituents don't need expansions to policing. We need the PD defunded by 33% and rent mortgage utility relief. And part of defunding is not having police respond to certain issues such as houselessness and mental health crises. Although I believe people involved in this work should have experience of being unhoused themselves, I hope having a new homeless services coordinator will start substituting for police involvement. Until then, to keep this issue as a major city goal, people should be able to sleep undisturbed in tents without the fear or disruption. This longstanding ordinance cannot be enforced. I know the issues that come with hard drug use, but criminalizing drug use is not the answer. There are many reasons people choose not to live in a shelter. They still deserve services.
Thank you. Next speaker.
James Bernal.
Hi everyone. My name is Jamie. I'm speaking on behalf of a student organization of Cal Poly students. We started a petition aims to get the state of California to increase the funding to research on gun violence. We're collecting signatures to get State Senator Laird to introduce legislation to further increase the funding. We're presenting before the City Council to spread awareness of our efforts, but also to ask the City Council for any support that they can offer and that they'd be willing to offer. It's just an overall petition to, like we said, to increase research funding going towards gun violence. So it's completely just to understand the issue of gun violence so that City Council, so that the state legislature can take further action on it. Thank you to the council, and thank you for your guys' time.
Thank you so much.
Rob Moore.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Rob.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Rob. I'm a resident of San Luis Obispo. First, thank you, Mayor Harmon, for your comments on civility, and thank you for the council for listening tonight. As we're all aware, SLO residents are suffering in this pandemic. Many of our friends and neighbors are struggling to pay rent and keep their jobs, and others of us are unhoused and need support more than ever. City staff tonight have discussed the importance of addressing homelessness while allowing for the sweeping of camps and destruction of the dwellings of our houseless friends. Telling people that they can't sleep in tents while 40 Prado can't hold most of these folks is a disturbing idea. It's freezing outside, and our unhoused neighbors are being told they can't even sleep in a tent outside. Police throughout the pandemic have been arresting our unhoused neighbors for small offenses like drug use as a result of ongoing sweeps, and that perpetuates and creates violence and trauma. Targeting, fining, and arresting our unhoused neighbors for existing in public only furthers the economic and social disparities that plague our community. Please stop and please stop doing these sweeps in the park.
Thank you so much. I encourage everyone that's commenting to stay till the end of public comment so that there's some good information I think that will be useful on some of your comments. So please stay if you can. Garrett.
Hi, I'm Garrett. I live in SLO and I'm part of Abolition Action Central Coast SLO. This council voted unanimously to make diversity, equity, and inclusion a major city goal for the year. One of the biggest reasons that the city is not racially and economic situationally diverse and is mostly rich white people is that it is so expensive to live here. So if DEI really is a priority for this council, please show it by making rent, mortgage, and utility relief that will benefit Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income people the most, a major part of the city's DEI strategic plan. That means redirecting, defunding the police and redirecting all those monies to rent, mortgage, and utility relief. We need all those reliefs during the pandemic from whatever funding source can be found, and the most readily available seems to be the bloated budget of, how much is it? I don't know, however much people are trying, or the council or the police department is saying to use for a police department, just put that towards mortgage and utility relief. Thank you.
Ellie?
Hi, my name is Ellie Harlow, and I have been a resident of SLO for 4 years. When I heard that Jan Marks and Colin Christensen said that we will not be defunding the police, I was outraged and disappointed. As we all know, houselessness is an imperative issue right now in our community. I believe, as I'm sure many of you do too, that houselessness is not a crime, mental illness is not a crime, and poverty is not a crime. In 2008, SLO implemented a county-wide 10-year plan to end houselessness. While the goals of the plan were achievable, they were clearly not achieved. And after the death of 15 houseless community members in the last year, this lack of response is disrespectful. In the 2019-2021 budget, police received over 27% of the budget, while community development and human resources combined only received 9.5% of the budget. Now is the time to reinvest our public dollars to achieve the plan to end homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Tristan Love.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Tristan. I've lived in SLO County for 7 years, and I want to address some of the comments made by Councilmember Marks on the 23rd. In regards to reducing the resources of our police department, Mark said, and I quote, "So many intelligent and well-meaning people are repeating exactly the same words over and over and over again, as if that's going to in some way be more persuasive. So my question to you is, why wouldn't that be more persuasive? If so many of these people are repeating the same thing, why wouldn't that be more persuasive? You are a public servant. You work for the people. If this is what the people is asking for, that should be more persuasive. Thank you."
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Maddie Bogler.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Hi, thank you for your time today. My name is Maddie Vogler, and I'm a member of San Luis Obispo, and I'm speaking as a member of the Abolitionist Action of the Central Coast. I just wanted to mention today that we need more funding allocated to the city's DEI strategic plan. The community does not need more policing, and we are calling for a 33% reduction of the police budget. These resources need to be allocated to the most vulnerable within our community, including houseless folks. We need to take care of each other during this time and provide support through rent relief to low and no income households, and providing accessible services without perpetuating violence within the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that came tonight to speak. And if you didn't get a chance to speak, just want to remind you that you can send all your comments to the council all email, and that gets to all of us, it gets to staff, and it gets to the public as well. Also, just want to remind the public, share or remind, if you don't already know, that I'm no longer on social media. So a lot of, if there's are events or things happening that are important, you need to please contact me at my city email to make sure that that's on my radar. And I would encourage you to send that actually to the council all email so that everyone is aware of things that are important to the community. And so city manager, can you speak? There's some good questions about how we're going to be doing outreach for houseless folks in terms of COVID and vaccinations. Also, can we get an update on the facility that the county is supposed to be and maybe about to, but not quite build, to help folks that are still in substance misuse, that they can get meaningful care? And then can we expand just briefly on the rent and utility relief piece and help people understand what's kind of going on with that and where their advocacy might be better aimed?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I think it's important to remember just the role of cities in the state of California. And it's a different role than perhaps, many of the other 49 states. Cities are municipal corporations. We provide the basic services: fire, water, police, fire planning services, and parks and recreation. The social services in the state of California are provided by the state, and the 58 counties that were established, they are political subdivisions of the state. They are arms of the state, and so all of the social programs are administered through counties. So, for example, our mental health, our social services, SDI, drug and alcohol services. All of those types of kind of county-wide services, so that they're managed at a regional level, are funneled through the state. And just as a reminder, just last year, the county of San Luis Obispo received about $260 million of funding for social services in our county. The city of San Luis Obispo receives zero funding. And I just want to make that clear. We receive zero funding for those direct services. And so using that model, and I'll just use that for example, many of the speakers acknowledge that there's some bills that have been brought forward both by the federal and state government, and that provide rent relief. In total, it's about $17 million. That money was brought to the county of San Luis Obispo. Ultimately, the county of San Luis Obispo, and it's a decision by the Board of Supervisors, decided that rather than administer those funds locally, that those funds would be administered through the state of California for those who are eligible for rent relief. So there again, that program is managed through the state of California. The county has also moved forward with a detox facility. It is one of the missing pieces of services that we have in terms of the continuum of care that's needed for our entire region. And that project is currently under its final phases. The county hopes to build that facility adjacent to 40 Prado. Now just switching our attention to vaccinations. There again, the county of San Luis Obispo, the public health officer, Dr. Penny Bornstein, they make the decisions about vaccinations. They leave vaccinations. Her office makes the decisions about who is vaccinated and when. The role of the city of San Luis Obispo is we provide information. out to the community that comes to us via the County of San Luis Obispo. The County of San Luis Obispo has been, and they have social workers that have been doing outreach in the fields, reaching out to CAPSLO, reaching out to some of our homeless encampments, and providing direct contact to individuals when it's their time to be vaccinated. By way of just for information, tonight during my disaster council presentation, I did provide kind of the spectrum of when individuals will be eligible for receiving that vaccination. Those individuals who are living in congregate living settings, like homeless individuals, are eligible under 1B. So when that time comes, ultimately the County of San Luis Obispo will let the City of San Luis Obispo know, and we in turn will provide information out social media. But the direct contact, that direct field outreach, that happens through the County of San Luis Obispo. They have social service providers, they have social workers, and they're the ones who provide that direct service. And I think this is an important point. If it's hopefully it's come across that the County of San Luis Obispo receives all of this funding, and I know that can be confusion. In many states, cities provide social services, or they have their own public health departments. You know, that might be the case, for example, in the state of Illinois or Colorado, or there are some cities in Oregon that have public health departments. Out of the nearly 485 cities in the state of California, I believe there's a handful in the state of California that have direct social services or have public health departments. So it is a very rare exception. And I know it can be confusing, and it's been a point of confusion throughout the pandemic about roles and responsibilities. And so at every opportunity, with the public at large, we're trying to redirect individuals to the County of San Luis Obispo, because ultimately they have the money, they have the authority, and they have the resources to respond to the type of needs. And so my response tonight should be in no way to be intended to disquiet those individuals who are coming. These are legitimate concerns. These are very legitimate issues. I think the council and the staff shares all of these concerns, yet you're looking at a screen of individuals who have no power, have no authority, have no funding, or any decision-making role whatsoever on these matters. So I can certainly understand and appreciate the frustration, and certainly in our role as advocacy, we can certainly make our voices heard for the community to the County Board of Supervisors. I have the opportunity to do that every single Wednesday night, and I raise these concerns, for example, that are brought up tonight with the county administrator about rent relief. What's going on? What's happening with outreach to the homeless? What's going on with homeless services? These comments do have an impact on us, but ultimately, for our ability to act on them is to be your advocate at the county, which we do in earnest. And so I just want to assure the community that we are hearing you, and in our role as a city, we're raising those questions, these issues directly to the Board of Supervisors. And I would encourage everyone to think about a similar approach.
Thank you so much for that, Derek, because I think this is a point of frustration for all of us on some level. I mean, I know as an elected myself, feeling like wanting to do more and then being limited, whether it's by resources or legal limitations and all of that. And I totally empathize with how that can sound on the part of the community, can sound like, oh, it's not us, it's them, like a deflection of responsibility or opportunity. And I just want to assure the community that that is not what this is about. And I get it that you come to the city of SLO because, for one thing, a lot of these issues are happening in the city of SLO because we are this county seat. It's all happening here in the city, but also, as frustrated as some of you clearly are with council tonight, and I understand that. On a certain level, though, it is on some, and it was mentioned in past meetings recently, that it's in many ways a compliment to this council, because you do actually recognize that we actually are listening on a deeper level than other bodies might be. And we actually are open to this conversation here. And we actually are doing deep, difficult work on these issues. And so don't allow that receptivity here at the city of SLO to deflect you from accurate advocacy that needs to be aimed at the county or at sometimes the state and beyond. So the city manager nor myself or don't offer this accurate feedback to deflect responsibility, because we want to partner with you and to get these things done. We share these concerns. We want to do more for houselessness. We understand that folks that are deep in substance misuse need different pathways, all of those things. And so let's, unite together to get constructive solutions and aim our advocacy together at the right target. Councilmember Pease, did I see your hand up?
You did, but you addressed my thoughts quite well. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. So thank you, everybody. I know this is tough, and I really appreciate the conversation tonight and people's willingness to show up. And thank you to all of the speakers that spoke your truth, and some of it was hard to hear, but nevertheless, you did it in a really in a way that I feel like is moving us towards solutions. So thank you for that and for showing up with that intention of getting some actual good work that I think we mostly all agree on, although we might disagree on the details, but moving in the right direction towards belonging in the city of San Luis Obispo and justice for all. With that, we will move on to our consent agenda. These are for items deemed to be non-controversial. If you would like to speak on consent, please raise your hand and the city clerk will call on you. If you are here in a lobbying capacity, you need to name that also, which I should have mentioned for public comment, but I forgot. So city clerk, do we have any speakers for consent?
No, we do not.
Okay, great.
I just have a quick comment on item number 6.
Go ahead, Councilmember Marks.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to point out that the criteria for the award of affordable housing funds was set in 2001, and I happened to be on the council at that time, and here I am again. So the reason I'm bringing this up is just to point out that what we do as a city council has tremendous consequences, not just in the moment, but over time. And so that's all I wanted to say, is that I really appreciate working with this city council and former city councils to make policies that really help the public tremendously. So that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Marks. And just also a little factoid for folks out there that were critical of our lack of affordable housing here in the city of SLO. Just want to remind folks, in case you don't know, that the city of San Luis Obispo has more affordable housing of that type of income qualified, so low, very low, and moderate income folks. There's more of that type of housing in the city of San Luis Obispo than in the entire county combined. So is it enough? No. Will it ever be? Probably not in the state of California. And nevertheless, we've made a lot of strides. We still have a long way to go, but we've done a lot of good work in that area. So with that, would someone like to make a motion on consent?
Madam Mayor, sorry, I just wanted to note that that item 6 about Toscano, I'll recuse from because my firm has been involved with the project directly.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Pease. Councilmember Christensen? I hope you're muted because I can't hear you, and I'm hoping it's not another.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yes, there's a second button you have to push. Okay, yes, I will go ahead and move consent.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Stewart, City Clerk?
Councilmember Christensen?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes, except for 6.
Councilmember Marks?
She's muted.
Yes.
Mayor
Yes.
Harmon?
Okay, yes, and with that, it passes 5-0. Now we'll move on to a public hearing item before us to consider a general plan amendment and rezone for a neighborhood park at 533 Broad Street. And so Community Development Director Michael Codron and Associate Planner Kyle Bell and Engineer Shalise Koppler, please present the report. Sorry, I'm sure I botched your name. Please forgive me.
There we go. There it is. My name is Kyle Bell, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. Today we are going to have Cassidy Williams provide the presentation for the North Broad Street Neighborhood Park. I'll let you take it away, Cassidy.
Thank you, Kyle. It'll just take me a second to share my screen really quickly.
While the screen is being worked on, I'll let you know that we also have several different staff members here available tonight to answer questions. We have representatives from the Transportation Division, Parks and Rec Departments, Engineering, and Planning. So we have a full team for you tonight to answer any questions, and here's the presentation.
All right, can everyone see the presentation? Yes, okay, awesome. Good evening, Mayor Harmon, members of City Council. My name is Cassidy Williams. I'm from SWCA Environmental Consultants, and this evening I'll be presenting the North Broad Street Neighborhood Park project. And to kick us off here, I'm going to invite Chelsea Klepper from the Department of Public Works to present and give an overview on the project history.
Cassidy, I'm seeing it as a full screen. Can you hit presentation mode?
Oh, are you not seeing the full slide?
No.
Okay, let me try that again. How about that? Did that work?
Perfect. Thank you, Cassidy. As Cassidy mentioned, my name is Chelsea Klepper. I'm with engineering and the project manager for the North Broad Street Neighborhood Park. So just a little bit of project history and background. This neighborhood park was listed as an unmet need in 2001 with the adopted Parks and Rec plan and element update. And it took us a while, but in 2016, we started with the supplemental budget allocating funding to the Parkland Development Fund to pursue a park in the North Broad Street neighborhood. So with the funding allocated, staff was able to review multiple site locations with neighborhood stakeholders. They looked at what would be the best fit for the city to produce a new park and came up with 533 Broad Street, where there's an existing community garden. In 2018, the supplemental budget was adopted, which allocated funding for the design of this park. With the design budget, we were able to start additional public outreach to gain input from the community on the design and amenities. We held several workshops in 2019 where we conducted workshops outside at the North Broad Street neighborhood, as well as at the Ludwig Center to present ideas to the public. So with this public outreach, we provided 3 design boards to the Parks and Recreation Commission on September 2nd. As well as the public made comment, and the Parks and Recreation Commissioners gave directional items to turn the 3 different designs into one final design. The design was then presented again to the Parks and Rec Commission per their directional items on November 6, 2019. And the commission had an overall consensus that the design included all the elements that they wanted to see in the final park. So with that, we took the Parks and Recreation Commission's direction and provided a full design that was used to conduct an environmental review and an initial study that we presented to the to the Planning Commission. This meeting was held on January 27th, 2021. And the Planning Commission reviewed the project and overall recommended approval of the project to the council with the addition of a few new conditions, which will be presented later in the presentation. So with that, we want to pass it back to Cassidy to talk about the council's purview.
Thanks, Chelsea. All right, so this evening, the council's purview includes review of the project for consistency with the general plan, zoning regulations, community design guidelines, and other applicable city development standards and guidelines, as well as to make a final determination on the project. The project is located in the northwest portion of the city, just north of US 101, as seen on the figure to the left. And you can see on the figure to the right, the existing zoning of the parcel is conservation open space, as well as the surrounding designations of that area, including residential and commercial uses. The project description includes the conversion of an existing community garden to a neighborhood park. This would require the revision of the project's general plan designation to change from open space to park, and a rezone of the parcel from conservation open space to public facilities. The project also includes various improvements within city right-of-way, including a new sidewalk, gutter, and red painted no parking curb along the frontage of Broad Street, and along the Broad Street and Lincoln Street intersection. Improvements would also include new accessible curb ramps at this intersection, as well as 2 new high visibility crosswalks along Broad Street and Lincoln Street. So this slide, you can kind of get a perspective of each of the proposed park amenities, which would include play equipment. We have community garden planters, including ADA accessible garden planters, picnic tables and shade structures. We have bicycle parking, which will be provided in the entryway plaza of the site, as well as a passive walkway, which will encircle the perimeter of the park activity area. The park would also include a fence along the riparian setback area to protect on-site riparian and creek areas, which are sensitive habitats. And the park frontage would have an installment of a pedestrian protective railway, which would be located in between the sidewalk and Broad Street. And this purple oval here indicates where the area that would match the improvements that are going to be shown on the next slide. So you can see where those areas line up. So this is an overview of the off-site improvements that were discussed earlier, including the accessible curb ramps at each corner of the Lincoln Street and Broad Street intersection. And these arrows indicate the high visibility crosswalks that'll be located at those sides of the intersection. And this rectangle identifies the new sidewalk, gutter, and curb areas. And this is that match area that lines up with the slide before. So city staff have reviewed the project and found it to be consistent with the city's general plan, zoning regulations, and community design guidelines. As was noted before in Chelsea's presentation, the city's general plan parks and recreation element identifies this need for a neighborhood park in this area. And 14 bicycle parking spaces would be provided in lieu of the required 1 vehicle parking space. As Chelsea mentioned, Planning Commission identified 3 new conditions of approval for council's consideration. And I'm going to let Chelsea talk a little bit about how each of these conditions would be implemented by city staff if approved.
Thank you, Cassidy. The first condition is pretty general about safety lighting for the park. The commission requested that we install some pathway lighting to better have safety and security at the park. This could be installed with city standard pathway lighting similar to other parks in the city. Example might be at Meadow Park has similar pathway lighting. All fixtures would be consistent with the city's night sky preservation standards if incorporated into the project. And the staff took initiative to look at the environmental review and confirmed that there would be no impacts negative to our previous findings. So the next conditions are to take a look at the landscaping, buffering along the creek setback, and confirm that all the plantings are appropriate for privacy and visibility for the park. And so we would take an extra step during the building permit process to review the landscape plan and make sure that those tree species and other shrubbery were selected for maximizing screening along the perimeter. And the final condition was to look into the feasibility of installing additional traffic calming and pedestrian safety measures. And staff did find that we are doing a lot of measures already with the project. So some of those include, as Cassidy mentioned, with the offsite improvements, there's a 4-way controlled stop at Lincoln and Broad and providing accessibility for all 4 curb ramps, high visibility crosswalks, as well as the pedestrian fence along the frontage would preclude children and adults from hopefully jaywalking across the street at the mid-block. And traffic has also reviewed this again and requested that we add a few additional measures to the project, such as no U-turn signs along the park frontage to help ensure that the safety of drivers are not making illegal U-turns in front of the park, trying to drop off kids and families. So those are some of the conditions that a planning commission recommended additions to, and we'd be happy to go over with the council if they feel that they need to be added to the project. We think they're all doable and we are supportive of adding as much safety measures as possible to the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So an initial study was completed in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act and found that all potential impacts that the project would result in could be reduced to less than significant with mitigation. So therefore, a mitigated negative declaration was prepared and circulated for public review between December 24th, 2020 and January 25th, 2021. The project didn't initially include any proposed lighting. So with that addition of the proposed condition from Planning Commission, staff went back and revised the MND to incorporate that into the project description and found that no new or more severe impacts were identified. And so with that, staff is recommending the adoption of the draft resolution approving the project based on findings and conditions, and adoption of the final mitigated negative declaration. And we're here for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Marks.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had a question. A lot of trucks use Broad Street on-ramp illegally. There's a sign that says no trucks, but they do it anyway. Because if they're on Santa Rosa and they see that there is some backup in terms of the traffic, they say, oh, I'll just take Broad Street. Is there any way that the city can increase the enforcement of trucks using Broad Street illegally? So that's a question. Another thing is, could we put any speed bumps on Broad Street at that point? because people really, when they're driving, they regard that whole area as an on-ramp to the freeway. And that's my main concern. I have to say, I'm really in favor of this park. I just want to make it as accessible as possible for the general public.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Marks. I've asked our transportation engineer, Luke Schwartz, to join us and perhaps field some questions that you've asked.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening, council members. Yeah, I'm happy to answer a couple of those questions. So on the potential for, in terms of enforcing the truck restrictions along Broad Street, yes, it's absolutely something that we work with SLO PD on. In fact, we regularly have conversations about targeted enforcement along Broad Street. The challenge is if it's a commercial vehicle that has a purpose along Broad Street, a delivery like at Lincoln Deli or somewhere else along that stretch. I know the Villages senior housing gets commercial food deliveries. That's legal. If they have a destination on the street, that's fine. If they don't, they can't be using that as a truck route. They need to be using Santa Rosa or Foothill. So it's absolutely something we enforce, and SLO PD does targeted enforcement pretty regularly along that stretch due to those exact concerns. In terms of a potential for like a speed hump along that stretch of Broad, yeah, we're happy to look at traffic calming measures, and I think the resolution includes a condition leading towards looking at more specific tools. I do know that during the Planning Commission's discussion, there was some opposition towards a speed hump as a particular tool to maintain slower speeds on that stretch. The one item of consideration that just needs to be in the back of our minds too is that, well, we absolutely don't want people using that as the main stretch to accelerate onto the highway and get up to an unsafe speed. At the same time, that on-ramp has a very short merge, and we also don't want to get speeds way below the speed limit along that approach to the point where more drivers have a problem getting to a safe speed once they're at the actual on-ramp and getting to the point where we're merging onto the highway. So there's certainly measures. I think the next step for us in the park design is collecting some more current speed data on that stretch to see what the conditions are actually like now. We have speed surveys in the vicinity, but not for that particular block. So that will help us better understand what might be the most appropriate way to help control speeds on that stretch.
Thank you. And do we have any timeline about when that on-ramp might be closed by Caltrans?
Yeah, we looked into this a lot as part of the recent planning effort for the Anholm Greenway, and it's been looked at several times. Most thoroughly as part of our loose update back in 2014, and at that time the city analysis determined that we need some pretty major upgrades at the 101 and Highway 1 interchange, major reconstruction to add capacity there to handle the closure of the Broad Street ramps. Caltrans looked at this again about 2 years ago, and their analysis concluded the same thing. And unfortunately, it's like a $30 to $40 million project to completely reconstruct the Santa Rosa interchange, including some properties that are affected, residential properties along that footprint, plus the cost to actually physically remove the existing Broad Street ramp. So at this time, we are collecting development impact fees towards a share of those costs, but it ultimately is not something that's financially feasible within the foreseeable future, and would also require coordination and support with Caltrans to lead that project. So for right now, it's something we still are endeavoring towards, but it's not a likely reality in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Pease?
Thank you so much. I'm also really excited about the park, and I'll save those comments for a little later. But in terms of questions, okay, sticking with the traffic situation before we lose you, Luke. So it looks like there's some modifications that the slide show in terms of people coming off of the freeway and kind of, it's currently set up to make that easy right turn onto Lincoln, easy meaning fast. And so then it looks like we're kind of doing some new striping. Is that something that we think is going to be effective? Are we thinking we might need to do something more? Is that, I don't know. I'm curious about that kind of change being effective with striping.
Sure, that's a great question. It's a challenge there in that one of the first things we looked at was, could we tighten up the corner radius there? And it's always stop, so the drivers are legally required to stop, but wider corners like that does encourage faster turns, and it widens the crossing distance for pedestrians too. So one of the first things we looked at was, could we tighten this? And in doing that, we have to look at what vehicles do we need to accommodate, because this is a truck route coming off of 101 serving the downtown and the businesses on that corner like Lincoln Deli. We found that just to accommodate the minimum design vehicle that we need to continue to serve, we couldn't tighten it physically with like a tighter curb. So we said, well, let's try to encourage a tighter turn there for most vehicles while still accommodating larger trucks that need that to track over. So it was something we hope to do. There's ways you can kind of harden that striping with things like the ceramic dots or reflectors to make it uncomfortable or inconvenient to drive over. But the downside with that is it's loud. So it's noisy when trucks and other cars do drive over it. So considering the residential setting, we didn't think that was a great idea for this particular location either.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. And then in terms, so right now there's kind of some faded red parking curb in front of the business, but this will have the entire curb and not a loading zone because we're trying not to encourage the U-turn. Is there some, are we concerned? I don't think that there was actual bike lane though along that red curb, right? So so here cars are, kind of, as you say, you don't want them going too slow because that is in some ways a little bit part of their on-ramp, but we also don't, but it's a share the road with a bike situation. Is that a concern to you?
Yeah, so the concern we had as we looked at this as a potential location from a traffic safety standpoint was worry with a lot of activity and conflicts mid-block. So people leaving the park, walking into the street, or especially with young children. And so the first thing we looked at was extending that barrier railing along the whole frontage so it channels all of the foot traffic towards the corner at the intersection there. That's always stop controlled with the new curb ramps, the new high visibility crosswalks. For cyclists, we did with the consultant team looked at some design options that included a continuous like separated bikeway or something along those lines that ramped up. There was some pretty significant drainage challenges, and honestly, there's a cost aspect where the more we spend on the frontage civil improvements, the less we can do with the actual park. So the current design encourages folks on bikes to get to that corner and dismount and walk that last 150 feet or so to the park entrance, in lieu of trying to access it mid-block where we don't want people in the street dismounting their bike or walking or being a pedestrian in that space.
Gotcha, thank you. And then my last one on traffic is I happened to, in order to check on the site, I was running errands and was in a car. And so coming from Lincoln, making that left turn, and then knowing because of the plans, like there's not going to be any place to park. But it's not really, I feel like that U-turn is kind of inevitable. And I'm wondering if there should be a sign at the left turn that says like on-ramp only or something like that, just so that, obviously once you know it, but otherwise I feel like people will kind of panic and make the left turn, or then they're on the freeway and, it's a tricky little intersection, just a tricky little segment of road that way.
Yeah, that's a good point too. We can certainly look at some better guide signage to convey that there's no parking on that stretch. There are still some residential properties that have access from that street. So It does serve as the access to 101, but it serves access for those properties too. what we found is, looking at this park, this is really a neighborhood park where we expect a lot of the visitors to be folks that live in the neighborhood. Or maybe they're grabbing a sandwich, they parked already and they grab something to eat and walk over. So we can certainly look at preemptive guide signage to show where on-street parking is or where you shouldn't be turning onto to access the park. It's also certainly something we can monitor once the park was in place and see if we're actually observing illegal behavior with the U-turns on that stretch and see if there's some better options that we can look to add on to clarify and discourage some of those behaviors. So
Great.
I think that's something we can certainly address without much challenge.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm not sure who this question is for, but about the fence and the access to the creek. And so I feel like, and maybe this is just kind of like, what's our philosophical approach about creeks, wanting to protect the riparian, but also at what point is this kind of like a, 200 years ago in early American cities or any city where we all turned our backs on the rivers, right? That was the thing that carried waste away. And then, we've had this gradual reclaiming of our connection to our creeks and our waterways. And so it feels a little funny here in that we are having a complete continuous fence around the whole thing. And it's hard to know, like, are we keeping people out? Are we keeping people in? And I'm just, it's such a lovely thing downtown when people play in the creeks, but of course we don't want everybody tromping on protected waterways. I'm just wondering if you could maybe share a little on what's our philosophy on, that approach.
Yeah, I can jump in there and talk a little bit. That was definitely one of the biggest design changes that we looked at. There was a lot of input from the Parks and Recreation Commission about the fence. We showed them options without a fence and with a fence. And we also consulted a lot with our Natural Resources Division, our city biologist, Freddie Oddie. And the consensus from the Parks and Rec Commission and the public and the city's Natural Resources Division was that the safety fence was a better solution for keeping everyone from disturbing the natural setting. We do want to get in there and make sure that this is a safe area and hopefully get more visibility down to the creek so that people can enjoy, looking down at the creek without going into that setback area. So the fence line is at the 20-foot from top of creek bank setback line. So we're not requesting any exceptions for building structures in the setback. But there was a lot of discussion about that, and it came about that was for the the safety of everyone staying out of the creek and hopefully preserving that waterway for the future.
Yeah, and I can also speak to that from the environmental perspective that, these water resources have pretty high quality riparian habitat. And so we felt that the project design with a fence along the setback was really in line with the city's general plan policies that speak to protecting sensitive riparian areas, as they also serve not just as habitat, but as migratory corridors within the city. And that's essentially kind of where we came at it from the environmental perspective, is that design was sufficient in that way. And the M&D also identified various other mitigation measures, mostly associated with the construction of the project and associated tree removal to protect those areas. But with that, we were able to reduce the potential impacts of the project on those areas to a less than significant level.
Thank you. That's helpful. And maybe an opportunity for a sign that, thank you for helping us protect this sensitive habitat and, admire from here or something like that. I think that's, so that people understand that strategy. Sorry, one more question, which is just the eucalyptus. It's a very large tree that's getting removed. The other one, the cypress, also very large, but clearly not in good shape. The eucalyptus doesn't appear to be in great shape either, but it is very tall and will be impactful when it comes down. I really appreciate the rest of the plan, and you know that is what it is. But I do appreciate how in the plan there's a lot of celebration of the trees, you know, kind of a framing of them and an incorporation of them into the design. But I do think that eucalyptus is going to be really impactful. So I'm just wondering, you know, what was the consideration there? Is there any way to salvage it? Trimming something?
Yeah, there's as Cassidy is shown on the plan, this is the tree removal plan. The eucalyptus is up at the top. It's closest to the street. It's been cut on by PG&E in the past. It's kind of been topped a little bit at the top, so it's definitely not growing 100% because of those overhead PG&E lines. And so we are concerned about that, as well as the debris that it leaves in the roadway, and also its location adjacent to the street. So the city arborist did go out and review and approve this tree demolition plan, and was in support of that removal of that tree. From the standpoint of it being hazardous for both the street traffic and also in decline because of PG&E's tree trimming work. And the other tree that you mentioned, it was shown on the plan to be removed, but based on the environmental review, it would have significant impacts to the creek bed because of its significance. So the plan going forward is probably to preserve that tree because it was not imminent to the design to be removed. But we will look into if there needs to be some safety pruning or any measures that we can do to help it along. We'll look into that as well.
Great. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other colleagues' hands up. So Teresa, do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
All right, thank you. Would anybody like to start a discussion? Councilmember Marks.
Well, I just have to say I'm really thrilled to see this project coming to this stage. It's been a long time. The community in that area has been agitating and petitioning the council to create a park in that area for at least 10 years, maybe longer. And so I'm just thrilled. I mean, in general, our city is what they say underparked. Like we're increasing the density in the city, but we're not necessarily increasing the parkland that's available to people. And it's really important to continue to increase the parkland, not just for some sort of arbitrary national standard about how many parks per 100,000 people, but also just in terms of the mental health and the quality of life of people. If we are asking our future residents and our present residents to live in apartment dwellings, well, where do they go when they want to experience nature and have a good time under some trees and like that? So I'm a big parks advocate, and I just, when the moment is right, I'd like to move for approval of this item. So thank you.
Yes, and it's wonderful to have you here, Councilmember Marks, for this discussion, because this has been an ongoing conversation for quite some time. So I'm glad that you're here tonight for this vote. Vice Mayor Stewart, did I see your hand?
Yes, I think Carlin was first, though. Christensen.
Okay. Councilmember Christensen?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I got my buttons figured out. Yes, obviously I'm supportive of this park, and I appreciated the more detailed questions to bring out some of the issues that we heard from the public about. I do support the Planning Commission additions to the conditions. I think they're very practical, and it sounds like staff has it well underhand. Kind of wanted to add to Councilmember Marx's comments. I was on the council when we did approve the funding to go forward with this park, and I talked about in a previous meeting how sometimes the council has to lead the public. This was definitely the public leading the council. I was not so thrilled about allocating the amount of money that this is going to take because I felt like even though theoretically we're underparked, we do have a extremely large park very close to this neighborhood, but the neighbors are really good about articulating the fact that that park is across a major traffic corridor, Santa Rosa Highway 1, and that they did want something that was more neighborhoody, and so I think that is going to be the people who visit this park, and they worked very closely with staff on finding this location and supporting it. So I'm happy to have to be supporting it now, and I will be seconding that motion or voting with it. I appreciate the work that everybody's done on it from the neighborhood and from the staff.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the great questions. I was concerned at first when I was reading my emails about the speed bumps, and then after today's agenda review and reading more about the crosswalk and realizing there really was so much thought that went into this. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that the cypress tree will be staying. That's kind of a bonus. So thank you for all of your hard work. And I'm really excited to see this park come to fruition in a way I wish I had still my little kids when I used to live over there.
Yes, and on that note, I think I did hear some little kids in the background of some of our staff. Just wanted to see if they had anything they wanted to add to this conversation. They'll be so excited when their dad, I think it was, contributes to building a new park for them. I actually love hearing little kids' voices on these Zoom meetings. Just so staff knows, I think that's totally fine and great. All right, would somebody like to make a motion then, or basically, I think Councilmember. Oh, no. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Pease. Oh, did you have Stuart or Councilmember?
Yes, I have one more thing, sorry.
Sure.
And I just really also appreciated hearing about the enforcement in the realm of whether it's U-turns or jaywalking or whatever it may be, trucks, because obviously that's going to take some staff, and I'm assuming that's going to be potentially extra staff. So when we look at this, what's that enforcement look like as a whole in the budget? That's going to be very interesting to see in April.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Sorry, I'm not quite done.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's okay. I do also want to, I'm certainly in favor of the park. I think it's a great upgrade to what's in some ways a park right now. So I think the zoning changes really are just aligning with what a great use that can be. And I want to thank the public and the staff and for the design, that there are just so many great details tucked in this design with the cornhole, the concrete cornhole, that there's the planter beds, but there's a bunch of them that are ADA accessible because they're raised so that it's more inclusive. There's dog amenities, including the drinking fountain has a low bowl so that the dog can drink. And it's really just a lovely design and way to incorporate a whole bunch of things. If my colleagues are in alignment, I would like to, I don't know, that needs to be a condition as much as direction, but I think the signage about the riparian protection is important, because I think that the fence has a mixed message for folks. And so I'd like to have it clear about why that's important. So some kind of signage about the riparian and how nice it is to, what you're even looking at, what you're looking for as you see this kind of space. Those are my comments.
All right, wonderful. Councilmember Marks.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Including Councilmember Pease's remarks about the signage.
Wonderful.
And the planning commission recommendations?
Yeah,
Addition?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Thank you. City Clerk.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Councilmember Christensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart,
Yes.
Mayor Harmon.
Yes, and with that, it passes 5-0. Wonderful. And it is our break time. We will take a break. Thank you to everybody that has worked on that project. We will be back at 8:15. All right. Looks like everyone's back. The public hearing item before us is consideration of the fiscal year 21-22 Community Development Block Grant funding recommendations. And so Community Development Director Michael Codron and Housing Coordinator Kara Vaccinations will please present the report.
Thank you very, very much, Mayor Harmon and members of the council. Good evening. I'm happy to be here with you tonight to talk about Community Development Block Grant funding. This is a federal funding program where the city, as part of the urban county, is a conduit for some very important social services and housing development monies. And we have some recommendations for you tonight. But first off, I just wanted to highlight, and Kara will speak about this in more detail. There's a slide in the presentation that will give you the specifics. But this year we happen to have the most funding for the city for CDBG in the last 10 years. And we're starting to see just a little bit of a resurgence, which is nice because we're still quite a bit off what our historical highs are. And there's always been discussions about reductions in community development block grant funding. But we are starting to see just a little bit of a resurgence, and we hope it's something that continues. And so with that good news, I'll turn it over to Kara Vaccinations for the presentation.
Yes, hi, thanks, Michael, and good evening, Mayor Harmon and members of the council. It's lovely to be here tonight. I actually just looked really quickly before I got on. I think I might have had one of the last public hearings in person in 2020, so I wish we could all be together, but I'm happy to be before you virtually tonight. So as Michael mentioned, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to review and adopt the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, funding recommendations for the 2021 to 2022 program year. So as recommended by the Human Relations Commission, it is before you to adopt a resolution to approve funding allocations for an estimated $513,086 of CDBG funds for that 2021-2022 program year. So CDBG grants are awarded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, and provide communities with resources to address a wide range of needs. The city currently participates in our region's urban county, which is managed by the County of SLO, as they are the entity that has the resources and expertise, like the Department of Social Services, to oversee this program for us. I wanted to make that highlight and reference back to City Manager Johnson's earlier clarification this evening during the public comment period. So through this partnership, CDBG funding is distributed to all participatory agencies through a non-competitive formula. And then each agency then develops funding recommendations, which ultimately are considered by the Board of Supervisors and adopted into the urban county's annual action plan. So for this funding year, the city is estimated to receive approximately $513,086 of our urban county's regional CDBG share, as shown by the graph on this slide. This $513,000 estimate is an increase from previous funding years, as you can see, which is really good news for us as the city. So projects eligible for CDBG funding must meet some specific program objectives. These objectives include projects that benefit low-income persons and households, prevent slums or blighted areas, and/or that mitigate issues and combat urgent community development needs that pose a serious immediate threat to public health or welfare, such as floods, earthquakes, and other natural disasters.
The city's annual CDBG review process provides the council and the public with an opportunity to provide input in the grant award process and assist staff, the Human Relations Commission, the council with providing and prioritizing community needs. This major step in the CDBG review process include the HRC needs workshop, city council priority setting, the HRC CDBG funding hearing, the draft action plan review, and tonight's mandatory meeting to adopt funding allocations. The final step is ultimately the approval of the CDBG allocations by the County Board of Supervisors, which will occur in early April, early May. So on November 17th, the council adopted funding priorities for this 2021 program here. These priorities were used by the HRC as the basis for developing the CDBG funding recommendations. The number one established funding priority relates to projects that provide emergency and transitional shelter and homeless prevention and programs and services. Okay, so this table reflects the projects recommended for funding by the HRC based on a preliminary funding estimate in the amount of $513,086. So the HRC recommendations reflect the maximum allowed grant allocation of 15% for the Public Services and Economic Development Projects category and 20% for CDBG program administrative costs. The city received 4 applications for that first Public Services and Economic Development 15% allocation, which is more applications received in previous years. The city also received 3 applications for the Housing and Public Facilities Project category, including one from SLO Nonprofit Housing Corporation /HASLO, and one from Stand Strong, and one from the Salvation Army of SLO County. Finally, the city is proposing to split our share of the 20% admin allocation for associated administrative costs and assistance with affordable housing related programs within the 6th cycle housing element. So let's jump into this year's applications. To begin with the 15% Public Services and Economic Development Project category, the HRC is recommending funding for 3 of the 4 applications that were received. The first is to Community Action Partnership of SLO County, or CAPSLO, for ongoing operational costs of the 40 Prado Homeless Services Center in the city. In the past, the city has chosen to provide 100% of that 15% allowance for this project category, but given the feasibility of the other applications received, the HRC has recommended funding CAPSLO for $70,953, with the caveat that should the city receive more funding than that preliminary $513,000 estimate, the additional monies are to be allocated to this project. People Self-Help Housing has also requested $16,809 in CDBG funds to assist with providing clinical, social services, and case management of their supportive housing program, or SHP, that develops personalized wrapped-around services for residents of their affordable rental properties within SLO County. People Self-Help Housing has experienced, like many other service providers in our region, an impact of these services due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but they have fortunately been able to maintain the ability to connect residents to resources that offset the health and economic impacts the pandemic has had on low-income and Hispanic households. Given that People Self-Help Housing runs this program at all of their properties throughout SLO County, they are requesting CDBG allocations from the county and the cities of Atascadero, Morro Bay, Paso Robles, and Pismo Beach. But although this project is in alignment with that first funding priority I talked about a few slides ago, only about 4% of the SHP clients actually reside in the city of SLO. And so the city is currently, Another thing to add is that the city is currently supporting this program through an HRC Grants and Aid Award in the amount of $5,850, which is proportional to that 4% of the clients served, city clients served. So it's for those reasons why the HRC has not recommended this project for CDBG funding. CASA has also requested $2,500 from the city's Public Services and Economic Development CDBG allocation to recruit, train, and supervise community volunteers to advocate for abused children. Volunteers are all court appointed and stay with their assigned child or sibling group until the court resolves the case in permanent placement, which takes on average 35 months. This project aligns with the first funding priority and serves children throughout SLO County. CASA is also requesting an additional $12,500 of CDBG support for this project from the county CDBG allocation and the cities of Aurora Grande, Atascadero, and Paso Robles. The city also currently supports CASA through an HRC Grants and Aid Award in the amount of $1,875. But the HRC does recommend funding CASA's $2,500 request in full. And then lastly, in this category, the 5 Cities Homeless Coalition has requested $3,500 to assist with various activities supported by the Housing First model to address homelessness in SLO County in alignment with the first funding priority as well. Although the 5 Cities Homeless Coalition is actually located in Grover Beach, they do support clients countywide. Of all the clients assisted in the last 12 months upon receiving this application back in September, they actually were able to house 7 households within the city of San Luis Obispo, which represented about 16% of their total clients served. And they also assisted 3 city of San Luis Obispo households with eviction prevention services, which equates to about 11% of their total clients served. They are also requesting $85,500 of CDBG funds from the county, the cities of Aurora Grande, Atascadero, Morro Bay, and Pismo Beach. And the HRC has recommended funding their $3,500 request in full. Okay, so moving on to the next little subcategory here, the housing and public facilities projects. This is the piece that represents 65% of the total estimated 513,000 or so budget of CDBG estimation for the city. And we received about three applications for funding. The first was from San Luis Nonprofit Housing Corporation, SLO NP for short, in collaboration with the Housing Authority of the City of San Luis Obispo. So SLO NP is basically the managing partner that SLO has, but same kind of people in charge and overseeing the organization, to assist with costs associated with real property acquisition to build Toscano family apartments, which will be a new 100% affordable community in the city, consisting of a total of 38 deed-restricted affordable units. The breakdown of that project includes 30 units that will be exclusively dedicated to families in the very low income category, and 7 units dedicated to low income families with 1 manager unit. SLO has also applied for a variety of additional funding sources, including city affordable housing funds, which was successfully awarded via the consent agenda this evening. They've also are using this to leverage state home funds, the county's affordable housing in lieu fee Title 29 program, all of which will leverage additional funding sources from private banks and a competitive tax credit award by the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, which they are really aiming to get in here in a couple of days. So this project aligns with the second funding priority and is therefore recommended to receive the city CDBG housing and public facilities allocation of $333,506. The second application received was from Stand Strong for $8,000 to assist with the replacement of the existing roof of their organization's emergency safe house, which provides survivors of domestic violence, abused children, and homeless / at risk of homelessness persons with supportive services. The rehabilitation will increase safety, security, and dignity for these clients at the Stand Strong Safe House by providing much needed enduring updates to the property itself. Stand Strong is also requesting $8,000 of the county CDBG Housing and Public Facilities allocation, which would allow them to complete the roof replacement. Although this is an excellent project for CDBG funds, the HRC felt this project could perhaps be funded through other financial sources and was not initially recommended for CDBG funding. However, should the city receive an additional $8,000 in this funding category exceeding the current estimate, the HRC included the caveat that those additional dollars be used to fund this project. The last application in this funding category was from the Salvation Army for a total of $300,000. This organization requested funding from all the urban county participatory jurisdictions to purchase an existing home valued at approximately $600,000 to provide 4 units, so an existing home with 4 or 5 bedrooms. Units of supportive housing for homeless persons who need long-term support to prevent a return of homelessness. Although this project is in alignment as well with that second funding priority, the HRC did not recommend funding as the application from SLO Nonprofit and HASLO provided more affordable units. On to the last funding category, HUD also allows up to 20% of the city's total CDBG allocation for program administration. Given the city has entered into a cooperation agreement with the county for the program years of 2021 through 2023, which is what we're talking about this evening, there is a provision for the county to retain 65% of that 20% allocation to cover administrative costs associated with the city-funded projects, thus leaving the remaining 35% for city administrative purposes. And so just like previous funding cycles, the city is proposing to use half of that allocation for these administrative purposes and the remaining half to fund affordable housing-related capacity building programs as outlined in the 6th cycle housing element. And that concludes my presentation. I have included the recommendation here once again for your convenience, and I welcome any questions the council may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is always one of, I think, probably everybody's favorite items that comes through. It's so exciting to see all the good work that's being done in the community, and grateful that we could be a partner to some of the nonprofits and amplify the great work that they're doing. Councilmember Christensen.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate those comments, Mayor. I agree with you 100%. And thank you, Kara, for a nice, clear report. I am asking about the letter that we got this afternoon from CASA, I think it was, saying something about an extra $500 because they kind of made a mistake about how they calculate their requests, and if they don't get the full total amount that they've requested from several different entities, they're gonna maybe lose all of it. So I didn't know if I had asked you to be able to respond, and so I'm asking the question now. Can we do that? Is there any money to give them another $500? That's the question.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Christensen. I think that Karen and I have touched base on this, and she has 3 suggestions for how to approach the situation, and certainly it's up to the City Council in terms of the recommendation that we move forward to the Board of Supervisors. And this does seem like a unique circumstance. At the same time, we have clear program guidelines for applications and deadlines in order for it to be an orderly and fair process. I think if other applicants knew that they could ask for additional funding at this moment in time, they might as well. And so we have considered some options, but also just caution on the precedent that it sets to change the funding amounts at this juncture. So Kara, maybe you can share your thoughts on those three options.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And Councilmember Christensen, I did put together a few different options that the council could consider and request to the letter from CASA. The first that I see would be that the council can choose to reallocate $500 from either the recommendation from CAPSLO or 5 Cities Homeless Coalition. So that's kind of option one. Secondly, the council could adopt the current allocations, but in the case that the city receives more than that $513,000 preliminary estimate, that additional funding that comes in be of $500 be allocated to CASA. And I knock on wood, from when I've been doing this, and I think pretty much historically, we've always received an increase beyond the initial estimate number that were given by the county year after year for CDBG. And then finally, the other option is to have CASA kind of plead their case to the Board of Supervisors for a final decision. As a reminder, these decisions that you make tonight get forwarded back on to the Board of Supervisors for final approval in the action plan. So there's one more step after this.
Okay, thank you very much for presenting those options. I'm sure we'll have a discussion about that during our deliberations. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I just have to raise the question of how reducing the 40 Prado allocation relates to our major city budget goal priorities that we just established. So I have to confess that I am a big fan of 40 Prado and have volunteered there for years and helped getting it established in the first place. So I just want to know the extent to which our major city budget goals would influence our CDBG funding priorities. I really do not want to see the CAPSLO allocation reduced, and I would actually like to see it increased. So that's my question. Thank you.
Councilmember Marks, can you maybe re-articulate your question about that?
The question is, how does the 40 Prado allocation relate to our major city budget goals of putting housing and homeless as a major city goal? And the question is how our major city goals might influence or not our decision tonight as to the CDBG funding recommendations. And I did, confess that I'm a big fan of the homeless shelter at 40 Prado. So,
okay,
is that clear? Is that clear enough?
Yeah, I think sure. Sorry. Mayor Marks, I'm happy to respond to the question if that's okay. And just want to highlight a couple things. One is that when the CDBG process starts off with needs hearing and priority setting, and that actually does happen prior to the goal setting process that the City Council goes through as part of the financial plan. In this case, the priorities for CDBG and grants and aid funding do align with that major city goal of housing and homelessness. And so, I don't think that's an accident. I think it's because homelessness is a major issue for us right now, and housing production has been a focus for the city for years. I guess what I'm not quite getting is in terms of the reduction of the allocation, the city is recommending a substantial grant to CapSlow, and then also funds CapSlow through its general fund and through other programs. And so I wasn't sure if there was a specific amount or a question about the recommendation that was of concern.
Sorry, not to have been more clear. The idea of reducing the CapSlow allocation amount that's recommended in order to help CASA out. And hey, I'm a big fan of CASA, and my husband and I have been CASA advocates in the past.
So that's not a recommendation from staff. That was just an option for the council to consider.
Okay.
The council did.
Well, thank you for. Right. Thank you for clarifying that. No, I would not accept any reduction of what's proposed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. I am not seeing any of my other colleagues with hands up. So, City Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one so far.
Okay.
And so that is Grace McIntosh.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello. Okay, and there I am. Okay. Hello. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Whoops. I'm not good with technology either. So my name is Grace McIntosh, and I am the director at 40 Prado. And I wanted to take a moment to give you a little update, tell you where we're at, and also just to thank you for your continued support and the HRC's recommendation for funding 40 Prado for the coming year. You know, when COVID hit, we had to greatly reduce our numbers and make a lot of very drastic changes in order to try to keep our participants as safe as possible. The percentage of individuals who stated that SLO City was their home jumped to over 70% of our overall population, and it has remained at that high percentage. Our outreach workers have sought to engage and bring in individuals who want to get off the streets, and our new downtown outreach efforts that we started in December have already seen success in building bridges and the relationships needed both to the unhoused as well as to the downtown businesses there. 10 years ago, when we started the conversation with the community to ask what they wanted to see in this new services center, what it should have, two things repeatedly were told to us. Number one was access, bring services to 40 Prado. We believe we have honored that commitment that we made to the community in bringing on-site primary medical care, on-site behavioral health therapy, on-site recuperative care programs for the frail and increasingly elderly population, which by the way is our number one growing population, so that these individuals can age with dignity. And in July, we will be opening our medically assisted withdrawal treatment center, the Detox. As Derek mentioned, we are in construction as we speak, and we're very excited about that. I did want to clarify a statement that was made earlier by a speaker that where he said, I think sobriety is a requirement for the shelter, and that is not accurate. In fact, we moved to a harm reduction model several years ago, and the majority of our population are what we call dually diagnosed individuals who are dealing with mental health issues as well as substance use, where we honor and know the process to recovery often involves relapse. And so we encourage our individuals to work through that process while safely at 40 Prado. The second thing that was brought up was housing, case management. Since the pandemic, we have assisted 100 individuals and families to get housed, which we think is a pretty phenomenal number given the challenges in our community with housing. As Derek mentioned, we are going to be expanding our safe parking program in a couple of weeks. We're very excited about the opportunities that you all have supported us in bringing to the folks here in SLO, and we really look forward to our continued partnership. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, for all the work that you're doing. Yeah. City Clerk, are there any other speakers?
One more, and unfortunately, I don't know the name. It's labeled as Casa of San Luis Obispo. So if the person could please state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Patty Smith, and I'm the grants manager at CASA. Thank you for taking my call and letting me speak up. We appreciate the mention of our letter. Councilmember Christensen, I really appreciate you bringing that up. It was our first time this year to apply for CDBG funds. We are experienced at CASA with these complex federal grants. We actually have quite a few large ones from Office of Emergency Services, but every grant's a little different. And we were so pleased that City of San Luis Obispo and two of the other cities recognized our work with the $2,500 support, but we are that $500 short, which if we can't get it, unfortunately leads to we can't get any of it. So Kara, I so appreciated the options you brought up there of ways that CASA could make this. I do hope there's one that the council can find in our favor to let us have that. And thank you all for the work you do. I've listened to the whole meeting tonight, and you guys really cover a lot of ground, and I'm really impressed by the City Council. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. City Clerk, any more speakers?
That was our last one.
Thank you so much. Okay, Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah, thank you very much. So of course, I do support the recommendations from our HRC panel, and I obviously I do not want to reduce anybody's planned award because that would be super unfair. So don't worry, Councilmember Marks. I would be supportive of if we do get extra money, giving that $500 of it to CASA, or if the board is, maybe they can have a conversation with the board ahead of time. I don't know. That's a little bit more dicey. So that's kind of where I'm going, but I'd like to hear from everybody else.
Vice Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. I remember we had the CDBG grants or the GIA, I'm not sure which ones, and we did make an exception in the past when there was, I guess we could say, an error on the applicant's process. So we do kind of have precedent that we could make that change if we wanted to. I personally would like to go kind of along the lines of Councilmember Christensen around the $500. If we were to get extra, that would be kind of the first priority. I would hate to see them lose all of their money as well. The concept around the people self-help housing, I was disappointed to see that we wouldn't be getting the wraparound services because we know that people won't necessarily always stay in housing without those wraparound services, but I do see that they're potentially getting some other monies as well. So it is what it is. And I thank HRC to make all these really difficult decisions. I've been part of grant decisions before, and it's difficult to do. So thank you, Kara, for all of your hard work and for the whole HRC's hard work. We really appreciate it. I would say, if there's the extra money, I would really love to see the $8,000 toward Stand Strong and the roof. Just knowing that would be such a help for people that don't have another option to go to other than the safe house. That's concerning to me.
Thank you. City Attorney, did I see your hand up? Did you need to chime in on something?
That was an error, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Sorry. User error. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the great work of these organizations in our community. As Councilmember Stewart noted, we do have some precedent for kind of exceptions that are really outside of the norm in order to support our organizations. I would rather figure out a way to plan on the 500 for CASA to be able to meet that threshold. And then if it turns out that they can get it from the county or we get more funds, then we can put it back to the original allocation recommendations. But I would personally, I would rather make sure that they do have access to that $500.
Okay. So, Michael, is the decision here $500 less for the shelter so that CASA can have it? Because that's kind of how the conversation's sounding. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what we're talking about here.
Well, right. So you have the ability to, the application from CASA falls under the Public Services and Economic Development Projects, which is 15% of the total, and grants are awarded to CAPSLO as well as, let's see.
5 Cities Homeless Coalition.
Thank you, Kara.
Yeah.
And so those are the options where the money, like $500 could be temporarily reallocated from those awards. And then if the grant comes in higher, restored to those 500 first, which was Councilmember P's suggestion. Or we could prioritize the $500 for CASA if the grant, the money that we actually receive is at least $500 more. So the first $500 could go to CASA if there is more money available. The HRC recommendation was that additional funding that may be available from the grant. It has been available in prior years. It's usually not that much, but $8,000 is within the range, within the margin of error for our estimate. Suggested that the recommendation is that the money go to Stand Strong. We weren't aware of that additional $500 request at the time. So there's a few different options here, and hopefully that helps you sort it.
Oh, I hate these kind of decisions.
Well,
I'm trying to think of that biblical story where, like, dividing the baby in half, right?
No.
Councilmember Marks?
Yeah, I just want to say that, like I said, my husband and I have been CASA advocates, and I very much support that program tremendously. But I think that in terms of our city, looking at the whole picture, that we should not diminish the contribution to any of the homeless services that have applied in favor of CASA, because basically it's a whole different ball game, and CASA is very personal, it's very legal, it's very individual, and it's a great program. But I do not personally feel that our city has to make up that difference. And if I would be happy to advocate with the county to give them another $500. It's not that much money, really. But I don't feel it's appropriate to diminish our contributions to our homeless folks or unhoused folks, either at 40 Prado or the 5 Cities. The 5 Cities program also encompasses the whole county. It's not just the 5 cities. It's also the city of San Luis Obispo. So I'm going to stick with that. And I have to say that helping the unhoused population also helps the children who are represented by CASA. So if you want to talk about intersectionality, I think we can help the CASA children by helping them find homes. So that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pease, did you have further comments?
They're all, either great choices or very difficult choices. So I respect those comments. I think relative scale, I think I stand by my original request, but I guess somebody could make a motion. We could see which way it goes.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion? Councilmember Marks?
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. City Clerk?
Councilmember Marks? Oops.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
No.
Councilmember Christensen?
Yes. Can we don't want to put anything about if we get extra money, they get $500? No?
It's in the,
Is that a slide or
it's
no?
not in the staff recommendation.
The recommendation is that if there's extra money, that it would go to Stand Strong.
Yeah.
And that's the recommendation from the HRC that we have forwarded.
Yeah.
If we were to get 8,500 extra dollars, we could, then staff has that. Well, let's see. I think under normal circumstances, we go back to decision makers if we don't get the direction ahead of time. So we do try to get the direction on how to allocate additional funding at this point. So if there was an extra 500 beyond the 8,000, we could fund CASA, but that's not the motion at this point in time.
I'm gonna really quickly just clarify something, Michael. That's a kind of a different funding category. Right now, the additional, if the city is to receive additional funding in the public services economic development category, that additional funding is recommended for CAPSLO. So if there was to be an amendment to the motion that wanted that extra funding to go to, to CASA, that would be one piece. In the housing and public facilities category, any excess funding that would be eligible in that category would go to Stand Strong.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, when we get extra funding, that extra funding also gets split by those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of math. I'm sorry about all this.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and support the motion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor Harmon?
Vice Mayor Stewart?
Thank you. So can we give direction though for the first section of public services and economic development, if you're to receive the additional 500 beyond what you wanted to get for CAPSLO, that we would give it to CASA? Can that be a friendly amendment?
I believe that would be a friendly amendment. Yes.
So, Madam Mayor, just
motion would need to be amended.
You've got a motion on the floor. You have a motion underway. I would complete the vote on the motion. If there's an amendment to the resolution, and then to clarify it, I would take that subsequently, just so it's clear for the record.
Okay, great. Teresa, I think you only have, I'm in support of the motion. And so with that, then it passes 4-1, I recall.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. So I would recommend, so if it seems as there's interest that if additional allocation comes in, that it be proportionally allocated between housing and public facilities and public services and economic development per the CDBG formula, and that we would allocate that to Stand Strong. And then I think the council needs to make a decision. The recommendation was initially for CAPSLO, but if you want to change the priority and have it go to to CASA first and then CAPSLO, then we need that direction.
So moved. So that the split, as City Manager Johnson said, but that that first 500 of available funds in the appropriate category would go to CASA, unless they're able to secure that 500 from some other means. But otherwise, the priority would be the 500 for CASA, and then the balance as per the initial HRC recommendations.
Are we all clear? With the
I think
motion?
the motion, as I understood it, Madam Mayor, would be to proportionally split any additional allocation above the 513.0A6 between public services and economic development and housing and public facilities, and that the first $500 in the public services and economic development category would be first allocated to CASA if no other funds are available, and all remaining funds shall be allocated to CAPSLO for services at 40 Prado.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I mean.
I think there's a motion, but not a second.
No, I seconded it.
Great. City Clerk?
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Christensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart?
Yes.
Mayor Harmon?
Yes, and with that, that passes 5-0. This is always a tough conversation. I do just appreciate how hard we're willing to work to try and meet as many needs as possible. And also just want to remind the community that there is a process. And so just want to invite people to be clear about the process and the timing and all of that, so that we can be as helpful as possible to as many as possible in a timely manner and get all of your needs in there in the discussion. And also just want to respect the HRC's process too, and their decision making. And I know they put a lot of work into that, and I have a lot of respect for them and the hard work that they go through making these tough decisions. And so it's hard to have a kind of a last minute contender, if you will. So thank you to everyone for that discussion. And now we will move on to the next item, which is to introduce an ordinance to amend Title 10 of the Municipal Code to adopt a resolution modifying the Dana Street Parking District. So Public Works Director Matt Horn, Parking Program Manager Gavin Hussey, and Parking Services Supervisor Alexander Fuchs will please present the report. And also just want to remind staff, I feel like this is, I know it's at least the second, I feel like it's the third time we've had this item. So hopefully we can have a concise staff report. And I see that Councilmember Pease needs to, I think, recuse herself.
Correct. So my office is on the corner of Dana and Napomo Street. So due to proximity, I'll recuse from this item. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. All right, staff.
So, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Staff are returning tonight to review the Dana Street Residential Parking District for the third time and to implement council's direction provided on December 8th, 2020. Since that meeting, staff have removed the 2-hour timed parking overlay, surveyed the multifamily properties of 5 to 8 units to determine whether they would like to participate in the district, and developed an ordinance and resolution which will allow for the multifamily properties of 5 to 8 units to participate in the parking district for council's consideration. Alex Fuchs, our parking service supervisor, will provide the report.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I think Mr. Horn did a great job of summarizing basically the entire presentation, so I will try to keep it as concise as possible. So before you today are 2 recommendations. First, introduce an ordinance amending Title 10 to allow multifamily properties of 5 to 8 units to participate in the Dana Street Parking District, as well as to make an adjustment to replacement permit fees, and to adopt a resolution modifying the Dana Street District to include the multifamily properties. On the map you see in the bottom right, show the multifamily properties that are recommended to be included within the district in the blue crosshatch, and then the red outline is the areas of where the Dana Street boundaries would be extended to accommodate the additional permits that would be issued to the multifamily properties. So as Mr. Horn said, at the December council study session, council provided the following direction to staff to remove the time parking overlay that was implemented along with the residential district, survey the multifamily properties of 5 to 8 units to ensure that a majority wish to be included within the district. And if there was enough support amongst the multifamily properties, to return to council with municipal code amendments and a resolution to allow for the inclusion. Staff does want to note that there was one multifamily property on Dana Street, which, oops, I'm sorry, I was just told I'm not sharing my screen, so let me do that for you real quick. I apologize. All right, can everybody see that? All right, sorry about that. So the direction provided by council was to remove the time parking overlay, survey the multifamily properties to see if a majority wish to be included in the district, and if there is enough support, return to council with necessary municipal code and resolution changes. There is one multifamily property that is comprised of 16 units on Dana Street that at the December meeting, council excluded from the surveying and being eligible to receive additional permits. And this was because the permits that would be allotted to this property would create a significant increase in permits and would also generate an increase in the competition for the number of limited spaces on street. And so staff took this direction and made the following actions. We removed the time parking overlay in January. And so now any vehicle that is within the district boundaries during enforcement hours must display a permit or would be subject to citation. And then multifamily properties were sent surveys from our office. And of the 28 units surveyed, 16 of them completed and returned the survey to us within the allotted time frame. 15 of the 16 demonstrated support to be included within the district. And this is the number that we use to determine the in favor support, which the threshold outlined in the municipal code is 60%. So there is more than enough support amongst the multifamily properties to be included in the district. And so staff prepared a resolution and ordinance that is before you tonight to make the inclusion official. And I did mention at the beginning with the recommendations that there is a minor update to replacement permit fees. And that's because at the beginning of this fiscal year, the annual cost for the residential permits was increased, but the replacement fees were not. And that's just an oversight by staff, but we're here tonight to correct that. And moving forward, all administrative fees for parking related services, except for parking meter rates, will be included within the city's master fee schedule beginning this coming fiscal year. So again, the recommendations are to introduce an ordinance amending the municipal code and adopt a resolution to allow the multifamily properties of 5 to 8 units to be included within the Dana Street parking district. And I'll move to questions if there are any from the public or council.
Thank you for that. I'm not seeing any hands from my colleagues. I do see some hands from the community. City Clerk?
Our first speaker will be Gil Braga.
Gil, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I was muting myself. Just give me 1 second. I actually have something I wrote down. Here we go. So I emailed the city council today, and I appreciate those who respond me, and also Mr. Fuchs. So the exclusion of 421 Dana Street, the only multifamily residence with more than 8 units of on-street parking, was based on a split the difference decision by the city council on the idea that allowing us who reside at 421 to get permits would significantly increase the number of cars parked on the street and not solve the initial problem. I'm here to let you know that based on the fact that I've myself struggled at times to find street parking during farmers market hours or during the days of any special event downtown SLO, I understand that this concern is valid. However, we're not asking for you to take our words at face value. Here are some facts. There are 16 units in our complex, and we each get 1 assigned parking spot. And we also have 6 guest spots, so that adds to 22. And taking in consideration that most of the apartments here are occupied by lower income renters that are roommates or young couples, each with their own vehicles because they have jobs sometimes out of the city. We're looking somewhere around 32 vehicles total in the complex. That would potentially add to 10 vehicles to have to find some parking off premises. The smaller areas that right now don't require a permit would be enough if there's no farmers market or business reopening or in-person classes from Mission Prep College going on. However, as Mr. Fuchs replied to me via email, the present situation will not likely to be the same once we're out of the pandemic. Then what might happen is whoever gets those free spots first will take them. And if us residents of 421 are unable to find a spot, then we don't know what to do with our cars. I sent the city council a video today showing that there are some areas of the street where there's no residents and where permits are required, and they're not currently being fully utilized by the residents who either have driveways or garages, and those are still eligible to purchase a permit. All we're asking here is to be included and not to be penalized for the simple fact that we own a car, live in a very expensive city, where the only solution is to share an apartment with someone else. So I invite you guys to take a walk around Dana Street so you can see that there is room for 10 more cars to be parked, and there will be even more space open because once business reopen, those people that work downtown or visit downtown won't be able to utilize those spaces anyway. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Tyler.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Right. My name is Tyler. I am also a resident of the 421 Dana apartment complex. And if the city council approves this ordinance, the closest street parking that I will be able to use will be a quarter-mile away from my apartment, a 4-minute walk. This is not a problem I was expecting to have to deal with when I moved into this apartment a few years ago. This ordinance is singling out my address at 421 Dana Street, blocking me from parking on the street where I live. In the previous meeting where the Dana Street parking was discussed, the city council seemed to justify singling out this one address, as the previous speaker talked about, by mischaracterizing us as probably a bunch of college students that are packed into the units and that they would create a large amount of extra parking. As the previous speaker talked about, we just have mostly it's 2 adults per unit and 1 car per unit, so not that much extra cars that would be added by allowing us to park on that street, on our street. I understand that that applying this type of rule for the parking districts around Cal Poly would not work. Could probably cause problems over there, but the Dana Street community is obviously unique and different from the Cal Poly neighborhoods, and what works for those neighborhoods does not necessarily work for the Dana Street community. And I would hope that you can treat the Dana Street community in a way that recognizes the facts on the ground and the situation for our community. I urge the council to reconsider this ordinance and instead work to find a solution for the Dana Street parking district that does not divide the Dana Street community and single out residents of a single address and inflict increased hardship on them. Thank you. I ask you again to reconsider.
Thank you.
Our next is William Watson.
William, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
There
we go. Oh, nope. You muted yourself, I think. Can you unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, I'll start over. My name is William Watson. I've been the owner of 421 Dana Street for the past 20 years. It being located in the middle of the parking district that you're currently reviewing, it is the only property that is being singled out as not being able to participate in this program. The consequences of your proposal is dire for all of us, for my tenants, for myself, and also for the city. This will force us to decrease our occupancy, forcing out some tenants and preventing others from renting an apartment. Not only is this financially devastating, but this reduction in housing would be contrary to the city's policy of wanting to expand the housing stock and making it more affordable. The parking district is already making housing less affordable by charging for parking that was previously free. It only makes economic sense for both the city and for us, of course, to be able to include more housing and not to reduce the housing. We are not asking for a ton of parking. We are asking, we can perhaps include with reconfiguration of our parking lot, we can perhaps expand our parking lot a little bit, maybe adding a couple spaces. So we're basically asking for a half dozen or so more permits. I feel that this is really an exclusionary discrimination of our property, which is not only unethical, but I believe it's illegal. It's really difficult to believe that selling a few more permits to us will destroy the entire parking program. That is very difficult to believe. I'm asking the City Council to reconsider their decision and its consequences, not only to possibly amend this proposal, but not to discriminate against my tenants and myself, and to treat all the residents and owners on Dana Street equally. You know, I'm sitting here listening to you talk about inclusion and not excluding anyone, and you know, increasing housing and stuff like that. And what you're doing, you're going the opposite direction with this. So I would really implore you to please hear our requests.
Thank you. That looks like that was the last speaker. Maybe Alex, or I don't know if it's Alex or Gavin, can you just remind us one more time the specifics of the parking permits for this specific property? And yeah, do they get currently in its current form and with this proposal here, there would be no permits allowed on the street? They would just have to keep it within the parking spots that they have currently on their property?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Mayor.
Mm-hmm. And can you remind us again how many spots there are there? I don't have that right in front of me.
Alex, do you have that number?
No, I don't have the off-street parking. I do know that it did meet the code requirements when the complex was constructed.
Councilmember Marks, did you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah, yes. Well, I've walked around there quite a bit, and I feel there is room on that street for residents to park their cars. So I just want to say that I think the decision we made earlier was appropriate, but it did not take into account the reality of what is actually happening on that street. So that's my comment. It's not really that's not really a question. It's a comment. So sorry.
No, it's time for comments, so you're perfect in that way.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to see this complex be treated equally with other residents on the street. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. So I think one of the things that's really difficult right now is COVID. I mean, I watched the video of Dana Street, and there's definitely a lot more parking right now. It's hard to really have a picture, though, of what post-COVID will look like or what pre-COVID looked like. And so while there's a ton of spots right now, what does that really look like? It's really hard for me to picture. And I guess that's kind of the challenge, is we're making decisions based on what normal life was or will be. And in the space of COVID, it's hard to make that final decision. Not that really helped us either right now, but it's kind of where I'm processing.
Okay, Councilmember, or Gavin, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, so part of this is we have not yet issued the permits to the 5 to 8 unit properties. So that will be an extra impact that is currently not realized in the permitted area.
Okay, Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah, it does feel like we've done this a number of times. And my recollection of the last time we talked about this was that the reason we said we went ahead and talked about making an exception for the 5 to 8 units, apartment units. And that is an exception. It's not just we are making various exceptions, various distinctions here. Was because 5 to 8 units is a whole lot less than 16 units. And there were some legal precedences that we were concerned about. And there was the fact that if you have a 16 unit housing place, that you probably have about 32 cars, which is apparently exactly right. And the idea is we're not trying to reduce housing. We are trying to separate parking from housing and trying to reduce the need for parking. And this unit was adequately built for parking. And, it seems to me that if they have one space for each unit plus 6 more spaces on their property, that's sounding pretty good to me. So they're about the same size I live in, and I'm just not. I'm feeling like I want to stick to our original thought process, and I think that I really have to compliment these folks. I think they've done a great job of advocating. As we all know, sometimes with these things, you just you can't make everybody happy, or if you do make everybody happy, you completely kind of get rid of the reason why you're doing this in the first place. And I'm just, we are trying to work with people on getting them to think about the use of cars differently. And to me, it just feels like a big step backward if we decide to do that. I don't think it's wise, and I don't think it sets a good precedent. And I'm totally sympathetic with anybody who can't find parking, because that's the very common theme. I don't want to go backwards, which is what it feels like. It feels like we're just giving up and going, never mind, just everybody gets a permit and park. I don't think there are enough spaces to park those extra permits. I think that we would see a problem. So that's why we don't do that for multi-unit housing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, a lot of it, as always, all these intersectional issues around, climate mitigation and really wanting to unbuckle parking from housing and how important that is and how crucial that is. And it's basically one of our um, underlying sort of philosophical commitments, basically, that we've made, I think, as a city organization. And with the parking that's already on this property, I don't know that it's also totally fair to suggest that it's, that we would be in alignment with things that aren't about inclusivity or equity or things like that. If the vote goes, in the direction of the staff recommendation, so that feels kind of unfair to suggest. So I don't know if anybody has anything else they'd like to say, or Vice Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. I just had one more question around the parking. I felt like we had talked about this before, Carlin, and now that you're mentioning this, sorry, remember, Councilmember Christensen, that since there was parking there, we had talked about, could they have a couple so that they had a guest, and we went back and forth, but who would manage the couple of extra parking passes? There was really not a place they could do that. So if there's already parking in the apartment complex, then isn't that what we're looking for versus the street? I guess I'm kind of confused on that, because I think it was so we only have a couple of cars in the driveway, or a couple of cars per apartment. I guess I'm confused with the ratio.
Gavin, can you perhaps just talk a little bit about in your answer about our assessment, and if we added the additional complexes, whether or not our assessment was whether or not the street would be oversubscribed?
Thank you.
Yeah, so based on the numbers of units that would be included if we did add that, the parking ratio would be exceeded that we have used for all other residential districts. It has worked successfully in other areas. It's not to say that there is no open space in some of those locations, but in this location, adding that extra unit in its current state would exceed the available on-street parking.
Maybe just to add on that a little bit, Gavin, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but looking at our December 8th staff report, it looks like with the addition of the multifamily residential properties of 5 to 8 units, Dana Street will be oversubscribed by 40%. So there will be a fairly high demand for the on-street parking on Dana Street. And I guess the other thing to kind of take into consideration is these larger multifamily units are intended to have their parking needs taken care of on site. So they would have parking for the units and guest units as well.
Yeah, and then that if it's oversubscribed by that amount, then it defeats the whole purpose, right? Then we're folding back in on ourselves on a policy, and then it doesn't really solve the problem. Then people still won't be able to count on parking that live there. And so we're not solving the problem if we do that, right? We're just, yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
I guess that's where I was confused kind of around the parking, is if they have the appropriate amount of parking spots per the apartment complex, then we're doing what we're supposed to do, I guess, is where I'm kind of confused around the code and how much parking we're supposed to allow and the ratio. And so I guess that's where I'm I'm not sure that we're doing something that is intended to be. I understand the intersectionality of the fact that it's very expensive to live here, and that's why we're trying to help get more housing, so we can help have more affordability. But if we have the right amount of parking in the apartment complex in the first place, then we're not taking something away from people. Am I incorrect in that?
Doing correct.
Yeah, there's more than, there's, what is it, 4 or 6 additional spots than the actual number of units, right? Something like that. So every unit has at least 1 plus spot. Not enough for 2 cars per unit, that's true, but enough for at least 1 car per unit and then some.
That is correct.
That's the gist, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Right? Okay. Councilmember Christensen.
Yes, I do believe we have discussed this enough, and I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to support staff's recommendation, which comes from our previous direction.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, thank you. City Clerk?
Councilmember Christensen,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
No.
Mayor Harmon.
Yes, and with that, it passes 3 in favor, 1 against, and 1 recusal. Thank you, everybody. And now we have a business item before us. It is acceptance of the Transportation Development Act and federal single audits for fiscal year 1920. So Finance Director Brigitte Elke and Accounting Manager Debbie Melicote will please present the report.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening, Mayor Harmon and council members. And let me just share my screen here real quick with you so we can get started. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Let me just see here. There we go. The item before you tonight will really complete the city's 2019-20 audit requirements with a review of the Transportation Development Act and single audit. Usually we report on both those audits together with a comprehensive annual financial report, and we hope to be back on track with that type of reporting for the next fiscal year. All of the audits are based on the same financial statements, and the findings pertain to the overall city control functions. As a non-federal entity receiving over $750,000 annually in federal funds, the city is mandated to conduct a single audit to provide assurance to the federal government that appropriate internal controls are in place. Similarly, the Transportation Development Act under Title 21 requires an annual audit of the city's accounts and records. Let's first take a look at the TDA audit, which is short for Transportation Development Act. The city receives 2 allocations with a minor amount for development and construction of local streets, roads, pedestrian and bicycle facilities. The larger allocation that we receive through the TDA goes to the city's transit fund to maintain transit operations. In fiscal year 20, we received $48,000 for transportation-related projects, and those funds remain unspent due to the Allenholm project, to which it was allocated, experienced a delay, but we expect that it will go forward soon. The larger portion of the funds, just short of $780,000, goes to the Transit Fund for operating expenditures. The Transit Fund is one of the city's 4 enterprise funds, and federal and state funds make up most of the funding needed to operate the city's transit system. An important denominator with the TDA audit is the calculation of the fare box ratio with a 20% requirement. Thus far, the city had always satisfied this requirement through appropriate fare levels and the Cal Poly agreement. In the 2019-20 fiscal year, the city did, however, fall short for the very first time, ending the year at only 18%, a courtesy of COVID-19, one might add, to substantiate that number. Though we are only about 1/3 of the required revenue to reach the ratio in this very fiscal year, the legislature did thankfully enact AB 90 that prevents any transit operator to be penalized for not reaching the ratio in both the 2019-20 and the 2020-21 fiscal year. Additionally, most of the transit fund's operating expenditures will be paid for by CARES Act funding in this current fiscal year, and that funding keeps the fund in good financial health despite the ongoing pandemic. Now let's turn to the single audit results for fiscal year 20. There are several components the single audit reports essentially on. It reviews both the overall financial statements and the federal awards to the city. In the reports on the internal control related to the financial reporting period and provides a schedule of expenditures funded by federal grants that include the compliance with all the federal regulations. Lastly, it reports on audit findings and questions the cost and the appropriate expenditure. All of the findings that were found for the city are on internal controls, and the audit did not find any expenditures that have been questioned. For fiscal year 20, the city received about $8.2 million in federal funds, with 70% of that funding going to two large projects with the Marsh Street Bridge and the upgrade of the water resource recovery facility. A further 28% went to the transit fund, and the remainder is going to public safety related expenditures. As mentioned, all funds were appropriately expended and accounted for. One of the single audit requirements is the review of internal controls, and it is the area where the city's independent auditor cited 7 findings as to recommended improvements. Again, these findings are the same for all of the city's financial statements and not unique to the single audit. However, the single audit report includes the findings and also includes management's response to the findings. I want to take a moment before we proceed and assure the City Council as well as the community that we take the findings very seriously and are working diligently to improve each and every area cited by the auditors that we will review here shortly. We very much appreciate our collaboration with Badawi and Associates and are certain that their comments will better the city's overall control and our functions over the financial processes. It might, however, take some time to address all of them. Any new system implementation comes with its unique challenges, be it through issues with the implementation itself, or simply the learning curve associated with a new program of the order of magnitude that the Oracle system presents. Previous roadmaps have been erased and new ones have to be essentially established. We are working very diligently with in-house as well as outside resources to eliminate some of the pain points and have prioritized the work based on some of these findings. The first finding pertains to year-end close and is one of the areas where the accustomed blueprint that I just mentioned was gone and every single report had to be recreated. However, we believe we have improved and are getting closer to addressing issues and addressing them when they have essentially surfaced with a timely month-end close now at work. The year-end checklist is close to ready, and we were able to essentially reduce the adjusting entries down from 90 in fiscal year 19 to 40 in fiscal year 20. We aim at improving at about the same rate for this fiscal year. Regarding the posting of journal entries and the numbering, I would like to point out that the Oracle system does apply unique identifiers. However, the system does not apply a sequential numbering. The ID is accompanied essentially by a date stamp that could provide the requested sequence with some manipulation. Staff does use now a workflow that requires one employee to prepare and another to post the journal entries, in addition to now posting the supporting documentation together with the journal entry. Despite staff being certain that about $550,000 of the variance is an unreversed journal entry that relates to accrued payroll, bank reconciliation is without question finance staff's highest priority to get addressed. At this point, the system does not reconcile any of the transaction as it has not been configured appropriately. Staff spends an enormous amount of time doing the reconciliation manually, which then takes away from other important tasks and exposes us to mistakes. However, we have kept current on a monthly basis since April of 2020. We also have a few solutions in the test environment and are hopeful that we can make incremental progress. And again, I cannot stress enough, this is one of the highest priorities that the finance team has for the Oracle system. The projects and asset module is one of two large areas where we will require assistance from Oracle to configure it correctly. In the meantime, we have taken substantial strides in cross-referencing our assets between systems and have a citywide inventory audit underway to make sure the city's assets are accounted for and retired when appropriate. Would also like to point out that the city rarely constructs multi-year projects that require annual asset capitalizations while construction is ongoing. The projects at time span over 2 fiscal years, they have never reached the dimension of the current water resource recovery facility upgrade, when we will have to essentially account for various assets as they are being put in place as the project proceeds over many years. The finding on accounts payable is one of high importance just simply due to the fraud implications. As we continue to look at system improvements on workflow, we have already implemented certain control functions. AP staff does not have access to the check stock, and the supervisor is required to provide the checks. Checks cannot be printed without the supervisor's review of the check register and the vendors to be paid. This occasion, I will also to point out that about 75% of our invoices are paid based on purchase orders, which are administered by the purchasing division. That is also responsible for entering the vendor data. Some payments, such as reimbursements and debt payments, do not flow through purchasing, but once we hire for the currently frozen position of purchasing specialist, we're actually reviewing and likely turn the vendor entry over to purchasing altogether to further segregate the duties between purchasing and accounts payable. The payroll system or the human capital management element really of Oracle is the second large pain point for the entire organization, and payroll is part of that element. We are working with Oracle Consulting Services to implement the system as it is intended to work. In the interim, we have found a manual workaround that assures the proper payment of overtime. However, any manual process, as mentioned before, really exposes us to higher risk of error, and hence the importance of the system needing to perform correctly. I am, however, very pleased that the horrendous problems that Council might recall that resulted from the go-live of the human capital management module did not result in a finding. Staff worked proactively to reconcile the corrections done during an 8-month period where we struggled with this implementation, which these corrections were essentially audited by Badawi and Associates, and no major issues were found as it pertained to the entire payroll. The last finding is connected to the human capital element, with Oracle Consulting Services also assisting in addressing the configuration. So manual calculations in the exposure to errors can be fully eliminated going forward. I would like to mention here that your Human Resources Department does an outstanding job in working with all of the departments to keep performance reviews timely. And even during this pandemic period, we're currently at an 88% on-time performance review rate. Now, before I turn it back to Council for questions, I again would like to assure you that your entire finance team takes the findings very seriously, and we will continue to work very hard to resolve as many as we possibly can before we actually arrive at this year's fiscal year end. And with that, I'm turning it back to the Council to answer any questions, and Debbie Mallicode is also available to help with any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Brigitte, and thank you for, in your words, but also more, perhaps as importantly, in your actions, taking it really seriously. And I appreciated talking to the auditor and really hearing that there were a few concerns, as you've noted, but also he had no concern that there was anything actively happening right now, right, that we should be concerned about in terms of fraud and those types of things, which is, of course, one of the main concerns in this whole process. So thank you to you and your team for moving forward on a lot of those changes, and looking forward to that conversation continuing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Vice Mayor Stewart.
I'll try not to echo too much of what you just said, Mayor, but I have to say that it was a pleasure to walk through this process with Mr. Badawi. I think that at first I was really concerned based on some of the findings, and then as he continued to share what he felt was comfortable, that made me, of course, a lot more comfortable. And when I had already, after I finished the audit meeting, came and spoke with obviously yourself and Derek separately, and saw that you had already started making the changes. So just, it shows obviously in your actions how you're moving forward already. I look forward to seeing that payroll module process fixed and done for you all, as well as all of the rest of the staff who gets paid by that process. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
Yes, thank you. Make sure. Yeah. I appreciate the work that's been done on this year's audit and addressing the findings. And I had asked Brigitte a few questions earlier today, and I just want to make sure that that you do have the resources, feel that you do have the resources and the time to address the findings. You know, the majority of the findings you talk about being real concerned about, and I agree with you, those are the ones, you know, in a timely manner, because, you know, it's a roller coaster these days, and we still have a lot of work to do in terms of economic recovery. And, you know, we've had placed a tremendous additional burden on the finance people over the last year. You've come through with fantastic models that have really helped us keep an eye on what was going on. So I certainly understand why you didn't get to a bunch of things that were left over from last year. But this is kind of for you and for Derek. Are we sure that we have the staffing and other resources that we need to address these?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. We are currently hiring for an AP clerk that will then free some contract time and position that we actually had received for the 2-year financial plan for the implementation of the Motion project. And as this was a contract position, we are actually moving forward with a request for the next financial plan to make this position a regular FTE, as we have evaluated that we definitely need more resources, both on the accounting side and the revenue side, to help us with the workload that we're facing.
Okay, good. I'm glad that you're being realistic about exactly how much is on your plate. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so there are 2 requests coming forward with the new financial plans.
I understand. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, members of the council, if I could just chime in, I think, you know, if you recall, we rewind the clock a little bit and we talk about the updating of our technology, because I think I've likened it that up until this system that we brought on board, we were essentially running a city on flip phone technology in a smartphone world. And we had literally spreadsheets that were linked into a system that was no longer supported. And we were clear with the council that we were trying to anticipate the staffing structure to support the technology. And what's become really apparent in the last year in looking through and working through the pandemic and looking at our budgetary process is that, and this is something that I'm going to try to fix moving forward, is that there is a fundamental disconnect when we add service and programs to not also concurrently add resources for support services. And we've done that for years. We have added new programs, whether it's neighborhood services or SNAP programs, or I could go on and list programs, sustainability, et cetera, where we haven't in turn added HR, city attorney, people in IT and finance. And so that is all coming home to roost now. And so I'm looking at all the budget requests right now, and you've heard from your city attorney, I'm hearing from my finance department, I'm hearing from my HR department that in order to support the operating departments, we're going to need to provide some additional resources. And that's tough, right? Because we have very ambitious goals that we want to have. And that's always been the community's priority. And we also need the backbone and infrastructure to support those outward services. And that's always the conundrum, and something that I'll be working on moving forward. And I've already had some preliminary conversations to make sure in the future, as we add operating programs, we're not leaving the support departments behind.
Thank you for that. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands, and I'm not seeing any public comment hands. So would somebody like, do we need a motion? Yes.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, City Clerk.
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Councilmember Christensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart,
Yes.
Mayor Harmon.
Yes, and with that, it passes 5-0. Thank you, Brigitte, and to everyone on your team.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
I can only imagine how hard behind the scenes. Oof. Thank you. All right, we have council liaison reports and communications. Does anyone have anything that they would like to share? No. Okay, then with that, we will adjourn, and our next regular city council meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 16th, 2021, here via teleconferencing at 6 p.m. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Stay well.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thanks. Thank you, Teresa.
Night.
Good night.